capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight, I have on the show again Dan Plaat of the Three Left Show. How you doing tonight, Dan?
Just peachy. Keeping it up.
Awesome. Yep, so we are back talking about political organizing using some pamphlets from the 1950s about how to organize just from the ground up, from scratch, at the very local level.
More relevant than ever.
Absolutely.
And also more relevant because I am, in fact, living it in that I'm now petitioning. Howie Hawkins for governor. We lost our...
Oh,
well,
nice.
I'm going to say we got our ballot line sconded from us. Como's goodbye wave. But anyway, it's really more the Democratic Party in general. I've ranted in the past about it. They raised the number of votes we needed to get in the presidential election to retain our ballot line. Republicans stop voters and make it harder for people to vote. Democrats make parties harder to exist, unless you have billionaire money, capitalist money.
Yeah.
But I'm conflicted myself that we should focus on some form of base building and building up county orgs before going for a ballot line again, because we've had a ballot line for a good 10-year stretch, and it didn't really help us grow very much. The assumption is we have the ballot line, makes it easier to run candidates, and then we start winning, and then that's what brings people in. They say, "Oh, shit, you Green Party people can win.
You're serious, yeah."
Right, and then we're serious. But I think it's strange that you think our veteran organizers would know this, or they still kind of have a mentality that we need the ballot line before we even ask people to join, because it's not really worth running candidates and whatever. But as more and more lefties seem to acknowledge, and I was watching on Means TV, highly recommend anyone who can afford it, their morning news program where they kind of did the kind of pseudo story of Bernie Sanders being open to running in 2024 again. But recognizing that, $20 million was raised each time he ran in a quixotic primary, which he's destined to lose because of the powers that be. No matter how many people are energized, so many volunteers, still didn't really matter because the Democratic Party is a machine.
The machine, yeah.
That is much big. It's not only bigger, but well-funded and has people at all levels with resources. And he said, what if we put the next $20 million into union organizing? Give it to the Smalls of the country, of the nation. Chris Smalls. It's a good point. Another point mentioned in our comrades from the left pod sphere, from We Are Many. They mentioned talking about, we need a Eugene Debs.
Yeah.
But of course, that makes me upset because it's no one quotes Debs more than Howie Hawkins. And he ran for president in 2020.
I think he was a great orator, too. Yeah, no, he was an excellent
And
orator. He just couldn't
yeah,
get in front of enough people.
he couldn't get enough free. It's really it's our great Achilles heel, I guess,
Yeah,
that we can't get in front of enough people, especially as the so-called independent left media also ignored us. Um, because at least like with Jill Stein, they talked to her, and that's what got us to
right.
almost 1%, and we could have gotten to 2% easily or 5 if we had even more serious coverage. Because there was the independent left that kind of pseudo serious, like seriously covered Jill, and then you had the left of center media like John Oliver, not
Yeah,
serious, cover Jill, but not seriously.
yeah. Unfortunately,
And since 2016, with Trump, it really went all out all the window. Everyone was totally convinced, basically because of Democratic propaganda, Democratic Party propaganda, that we're spoilers and we helped elect Trump. It's still very much an uphill battle. So sometimes I have my heart in the petitioning. You know, we need at minimum 45,000 signatures in New York. And in order to, because if you're doing it in public, the rule of thumb is that half of the signatures you get won't be good. Um,
oh, they'll
yeah,
find a reason to reject them.
right. Or like something, there'll be a mistake, or they weren't actually a voter, registered voter. There'll be something wrong. Now, if you go door to door, right, you get half as many signatures, but with a walk list, as discussed in previous episodes, of
Hmm.
registered voters, you know they're good. So you kind of either get 10 an hour going door to door, or you get 20, 25 an hour or more, depending on the size of a crowd that you're coming by. But let's say you're on a street corner.
Yeah,
And because it's just petitioning, most people say sure. You know, there's it's not like pulling teeth. Though you'll
right.
come across somebody who's like, Green Party, don't you guys help Republicans get elected? You know, and they don't know. And even many lefties still have an idea that we're just social democrats, which means like we're not even as left as Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Uh, so, oh boy. Okay, so there's a problem downstairs. I may need to. Can we actually start in an hour or half an hour? Can I have half an hour? We
Yeah,
may need
yeah.
to
Okay.
restart.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so I guess we'll just hang out together, guys, for half an hour. We'll find out something to do. Well, Dan takes care of what's going on. Hello, James. Hello, Natalie. How are you guys doing tonight? Good to see you back. I always enjoy having you all in chat. I feel like I got a fan club now. You guys always are showing up, so appreciate y'all being here. What's on your mind tonight? Are you feeling the spring weather finally? It's kind of it. I mean, it was a very blustery day for me today. Still cold, not just quite spring-like, but at least when we went to the garden center, there were the annual flowers out. So I usually take that as my cue. I do landscaping during the summertime, and I'm back at that right now. And a big part of what I do is seasonal color. So like if there's a big planter outside of an office building or something like that, I will put flowers in it for spring. Then I'll change it out, put something different for summer, fall, and then even winter. We do like spruce tips and other winter decor in those planters. So I'm always kind of nervous at this time of year because you want stuff to be out as early as possible and have a lot of color when there's not a lot. Like the trees have not leafed out yet or anything. In I mean, I'm in Minnesota. I'm sure if you're any further south, like probably Natalie, even, I'm guessing you already have a week of spring under your belt at this point. But up here in Minnesota, we are slow to get into that spring season. And so I'm always wary of this time of year because you want, like I said, you want to have color out there as soon as possible. But at the same time, you don't want to risk because I mean these planters can be hundreds, thousands of dollars sometimes. Um, you don't want to risk the living things not surviving because, as with most annuals, it tends to be stuff that's not hardy to Minnesota. Sometimes I use hardy stuff. I'm trying more and more to use hardy stuff, but in general, things like pansies and Well, I guess the daffodils and the hyacinths are hardy, so I don't worry as much about those. But the like the Easter lilies, if I were to use something like that, it can't really take the frost. So, but now that the garden centers are putting their stuff out, um, I'm feeling more confident. I think this is going to be the week where we finally do the spring rollout. It's always a lot of fun. Um, in fact, as long as we're just kind of waiting for Dan and looking to fill some time, we can take a look. I was 81 yesterday. Yeah, see, it was in the 70s in Minnesota. We didn't quite make it to 81 though. Didn't quite. Yeah, and we're back down to the 50s too. Rose bushes and flowers, but I'm a fan of evergreen. Um, so Natalie, I know that you're in Zone 5 USDA, being in the Chicagoland area, or at least I guess any part of Illinois is Zone 5. Do you know what zone you're in, James? By chance, you can look it up. I'll tell you guys if you haven't seen it before. You just search for USDA hardiness zone. And then you go to like images. I'll bring it up on the screen too. Here we go. Hardiness zones. So let's see. There's a fine one, fine representation. So here we are. So okay, we get it, Brex. We love that you got free shipping, but I am way up here in Zone 4. Sometimes a lot of years, in fact, probably I would say even I would wager to say three out of the 75% of the last 20 years, like 15 of the last 20 years, we would have been classified more like Zone 5, because the way that these hardiness zones are um, determined is what is going to be the minimum temperature that you get. So in Zone 4, negative 20 Fahrenheit. I have no idea what that is Celsius, but it's damn cold. Um, so for something to grow here and come back in the next year, whether it's an annual or a perennial, because annuals can seed and come back, um, it has to be able to withstand temperatures down to negative 20. So like, I guess Illinois is kind of split right in half. I don't know what part of Illinois you're at. In fact, it looks like the Great Lakes right in Chicago is bumped up to even Zone 6. Um, and then James, you were over in West Virginia, so I'm guessing you're probably pretty solidly in Zone 6, unless you're high. I'm guessing that's high in the Appalachians there, where it gets a little bit colder. Zone 5? Nice. Man, I'm so envious of Zone 5. There's so many things that I go through like garden catalogs at this time of year a lot. And I'm like, oh, this would be an amazing tree or an amazing bush to have, or oh wow, I'd love to have this ground cover. And I look at the hardiness zone, and of course, a lot of the times it turns out to be Zone 5. It seems like Zone 5 and 6 is kind of the sweet spot for growing things. You can't get the tropical stuff yet at that low of a temperature, but there's a lot of kind of semi-tropical stuff that grows up that high. Pretty much any temperate climate thing can grow in a 5 or a 6. It's 4 and lower when it starts to get to like tundra conditions almost. Uh, yeah, the weather does have a mind of its own. So you're down in the valley, so get snow when it's 55 here. Oh, that's funny. So yeah, I'm guessing you're probably in like Zone 6 then, James. Um, but yeah, there's so many plants that grow in that range. And so there's stuff that uh, won't grow further south than like a 7 or an 8, but grows just fine in Zone 5 or 6. And then there's a lot of stuff that won't grow farther north than, or colder, let's say, than a 5 or a 6. So you get like the best of both worlds. It's kind of like that permaculture principle of valuing the marginal, um, uh, putting value into the margins. So like the places where two zones meet is often where there's the most biological activity. So you think of like a lake shore or a tide pool or the tree line of a forest next to a prairie, you get animals from both biomes kind of intermingling in that space. So there's a lot of the there's like the greatest biological activity going on there. So I always envy you guys. uh, I love Minnesota, but I don't think I would choose to live here if I could go somewhere else. But my kids are here now, so that kind of keeps me here. But maybe once they're grown, you never know. Um, I'd really like to live in a place more like the Pacific Northwest, like get into some of those really nice zones where never quite gets below 40. Once in a while it'll snow, but that's a rarity. That's more my kind of weather because I don't mind having a fairly cold winter. I don't mind things snowing once in a while, or it snowing once in a while. It's just the bitter cold when it gets down into like single digits or less that I'm like, why do I live in this state? Yeah. uh, let's see. Let's go back to that tab there. So yeah, Pacific Northwest, even like up in Vancouver, British Columbia. I think that would be like my ideal city. Although Ontario wouldn't be that bad either. It's actually pretty mild. It's got that lake effect, being surrounded by the two different um, Great Lakes there. That'd be fine too. So either Toronto or Vancouver probably be more ideal for me, and then I would actually get some health care. That'd be cool too. Wouldn't mind that one bit. And it seems like they're pushing for more coverage of like dental and eye and maybe, yeah, who knows, maybe one day even like mental health. And I know it's a very out there leftist idea that your emotional well-being is part of your health, but surprise, surprise, it is. So yeah, right. Oh, I've only briefly been. I've basically just been through West Virginia. Maybe seen a little bit of it. I'm not quite sure. My parents, my dad has friends out in Virginia, and I think we crossed into West Virginia for some outing or something like that. But yeah, that's what I've heard. It's one of the most beautiful states. One of the most impassable states as well. It is it's pretty mountainous. It just seems like there's a whole lot there that gets benefited in a certain way from that benign neglect of just being a difficult state to get to. But I mean, I guess there's the flip side of that as well, of course, that they don't get a lot of support monetarily. Um, so yeah. Where can you grow orange trees? I saw a hardy orange. You can definitely grow orange trees in parts of California, and I'm pretty sure I've seen them in Arizona as well. They're maybe like the southern like southwest corner of New Mexico. I would think most of Texas actually, big portion of Texas. But let's find out. We can look these things up. Let's see if we can find like a hardy orange or something. No results. We'll have to go back to just a general search. Hardy orange, the flying dragon. Let's see what we can get from that. Fast growing trees. I've been getting lots of ads from them lately. It's a pretty tree. Is that real? These like butterfly flowers on it almost? That doesn't seem real. Very beautiful if true though. No, it looks like those are the flowers. That's strange. I'm guessing that person posted the wrong picture. Whoever posted that one. It's a thorny orange though too. I had no idea that any orange trees had thorns. Look at that. Here's an orange that can grow in zone 5 and warmer. So you could be growing this right now, Natalie. Isn't that cool? They've done a lot of stuff with pushing the the zone limits of a lot of things. Like I never would have thought that you'd be able to grow like almonds or peaches or stuff like that in Minnesota. But yeah, you can. There's a lot of different fruits you can grow here, including those. They're very, very specific varieties that have been bred that way. Cool. A very flat farming area of Illinois, Natalie. Really disappointing. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Minnesota's a very flat state too. We were ground down, just like you guys, I would assume, from the glaciers that used to cover the Midwest that form the Great Lakes. So yeah, there's we have what are called ski hills here, but you know, it's just like it says. It's a big hill. It's nowhere near like a mountain. Closest thing we have to mountains here is like up near Duluth. There's an area that has like a couple mountains. There's Eagle Mountain and Spirit Mountain. And they're both used for skiing, and they start to resemble probably what would be foothills anyplace else. But you know, since that's the best we got in Minnesota, we call them we call them mountains. Yeah, I didn't expect that about oranges either. But hey, look, there's something to try out. That'd be so cool to be able to grow citrus. I know there was recently a variety of fig. It's called the Chicago fig. So I'm assuming it grows in Zone 5 as well. Chicago hardy fig. It's another one that seems... Yeah, look, there you go. Snow on the fruits itself. I gotta figure that's a staged photo. I don't know how that would happen. I would seriously doubt that the fruit would be out that early in the season. Fig trees are beautiful though. Got that very trilobed shape to them. If any of you are just joining us, we're just waiting on Dan to get back. He had to go deal with something quickly, and then we'll get into the political organizing stuff. So in the meantime, we're just kind of talking about growing stuff and spring and all that sort of thing. Chicago hardy fig. There you go. Zone 5 again. Zone 5 to 10 outdoors. That'd be really cool. You can make your own fig Newtons. So West Virginia has a lot of hills and small mountain chains in the forests, unless they tear it down to mine the coal. Yeah, that's really sad. It's sad that coal still has so much sway in West Virginia too. It is an industry without much of a future. Everything is going to move to natural gas and hopefully to more renewable sources than that. And automation is just going to continue killing the jobs that once were. So I guess on the bright side, it can't hold power over West Virginia forever, but there's always the danger that it will completely ruin the natural environment before it gets to that point. Thanks for the following. Ivermectin works. Oh, God. Let's hope that is an ironic name that you've chosen for yourself. Coal has to end sooner or later. Yeah, right. I mean, it's a finite resource. Did well for the state economically for a time, but it's a finite resource, and most of the best coal places have already been tapped, and the ones that are left are more and more just going to be automated operations. But I mean, if you care about the place, the lands that you live in at all, you can't do things like they do and just dump the tailings into the water. It's a problem here in Minnesota too. We still have some mineral mines that dump tailings into Lake Superior, in fact, if not some tributary that runs into it. but yeah, eh, you have to deal with waste in a better way if you're even gonna, you know, have a state to enjoy once all the once all the coal has been mined out. So it's just tragedy that has happened there, and tragedy basically overall the way that that state has been neglected by, well, basically the rest of the country. Um, kind of one of those states that's written off as, you know, a redneck state, which I don't agree with that assessment whatsoever. Um, but yeah, I believe it's still one of the poorest, if not the poorest, states in the nation, despite having, you know, still coal operations ongoing. But yeah, let's see what else. What other cool things we can find? Do you guys? Oh, let's see. They think that we're all from a Wrong Turn movie. Yeah, which is stupid. I used to listen to this podcast from West Virginia. Um, it was called The Mountain Stage. It's a really great podcast. If you like bluegrass or like Americana sort of country music, and even some pop stuff too. They put on like I think it's an NPR member station, and they put on concerts constantly, and they get big name bands. Um, yeah, it's just, you know, free concert right there. Every, like, I guess it's probably like every week or so that they put out a new episode. Yeah, the Mountain Stage, and that's from Charleston, West Virginia. That's where they do it. It's a very good show. But yeah, you couldn't have that if you're all just, you know, backwoods sort of people, and even people that live in rural areas. They're not inherently stupid or backwards in any way. That's these are not good stereotypes, and the left too is guilty of perpetuating these stereotypes, to our own detriment, really, because these should be allies. We should be forming working class solidarity with, uh, oftentimes the poorest of people, which are people that are out in rural areas and haven't had a lot of attention from, you know, the big centers of government to get modern infrastructure and stuff like that. So, yeah, I just think it's very unhelpful. So I try not to do it, but, you know, once in a while I catch myself slipping, do one of those cliched Southern accents when I'm being derisive. But I try not to. I try not to. Um, and yeah, I don't feel good about myself if I uh, do that sort of thing. Yeah, right. Right. That's very true. Someone has to be the hillbilly, James says. So it's easy to make us the hillbilly. Yeah. But I mean, no one has to. It's all part of the capitalist game to keep us, you know, hating one another and, you know, tearing one another down, when we have more in common, at least in a class perspective, than we do that tears us, or that should divide us. And I think it would go a long way to in easing some of the other prejudices as well. You know, just more intersectionality leads to more intersectionality and more people being brought into the fight together. Looks like Dan might be ready to come back on. Looks like he is. All right, we'll bring him back on.
Howdy ho.
Hey, how's it going?
Having a good chat with the chat.
Yeah, we were just talking about spring and, you know, growing stuff, and we found out there's an orange tree that grows in Zone 5, which is around like you know, Chicago type weather and stuff like that. So that was pretty interesting.
I discussed on my show how the Soviet Union grew all their citrus fruit.
Oh,
They hybridized a bunch of different variants to grow along the Black Sea coast using a
oh,
bunch
really?
of they dug ditches and planted them in. They
I've heard of that
had
technique.
they
Yeah.
had terraced glass house greenhouses,
Oh, very cool.
and they hybridized like orange citrus trees that crept along the ground, so they were closer to the ground.
Whoa, that I've never heard of. That's
They did all
amazing.
kinds of things because they had to grow all their own. You know, capitalists weren't
Right,
going to sell fruit.
right,
They can't
right.
get their fruit from Honduras.
That's one of those things about like embargoes, is
Oh
that it
no,
forces
you've
you
completely
to
frozen.
find. Oh no, I am I still frozen? It's still looking good on my end. Am I still frozen? Huh. That's so weird. I'm. Are you guys in the chat still seeing me? Because it looks perfectly fine of a connection to me.
Hmm.
We'll try cycling Dan off and on. See if that helps at all. Hey, are you hearing me yet?
I may need to leave. You're completely frozen.
Oh shoot.
If you can hear me.
Okay. Oh boy. Oh well. I guess he's gonna have to come back on. I can hear him coming back.
All right,
Okay,
there.
can you hear him?
Now we're
Things are good. I don't know what happened there. I didn't see any
you
lapse in
completely
connection from
you
either end.
completely
That was weird.
yeah you completely froze. So I had to do that most manly of skills, tighten a
Hmm.
bolt.
Oh.
Yes,
Okay.
on toilet though. So who knows? Like, did I have to replace some sealant? I wouldn't. I'd have to spend an hour looking for the sealant. So
Oh wow.
I'm not great with plumbing jobs unless it's just tightening something, which is I guess fine for now. But the real problem is the floor that the toilet is sitting in, which is it's sagging an inch.
Oh no.
That's the big task for the next once the current tenants are going to move out in a week by end of
Uh
month,
huh.
so it only has to last that long, and then I can replace the floor, which will be
Okay.
I haven't really done a medium job like that yet, so I'm gonna need some help or a lot of tutorials online,
Yeah.
which I don't
I'm
know
sure
would
there's a
be
lot of that
helpful.
on YouTube. But
But
man, that's like the
are there
nightmare.
some
You know,
where it goes down to like you have to go down to the joist though, not just the subfloor?
I would bet so.
Um,
I've
yeah.
heard I've met people who's like figured out how to fix their entire car through YouTube tutorials. So
Mm.
I would imagine that sort of thing would exist somewhere.
So I left off. I was regaling you in the chat about petitioning, particularly,
Yeah. Hmm.
which is kind of covered. No, I guess will be covered a little bit in this chapter, which is just the political campaign overall. And now, of course, it cannot does not have to be an electoral campaign. It can be any kind of campaign, union campaign,
Sure.
tenant campaign. Now, of course, my own ideology or thesis is that how is third party politics still like it's electoral, but to me, it's still independent organizing, because whether we have a ballot line or not, we can be a political union that um, can fight the two party system on in its own well it's in its own game, but we're not game changing is the issue. So like there
Hmm.
is this revolving feeling stuck since I joined, and before that it was another 10 years of probably feeling the same thing. And yet some of these organizers, they just carry on, they just kind of keep going.
Hmm.
So I don't know if they're just stuck in their ways and they're just like they have the ideology bug like so many others.
Right.
um, but new people do show up and join and are part. So it's not just the same five people every time. There's actually a really good mix of people. And one of the things that was created for New York State Green Party was that we one of our members created our own voter database.
Hmm.
So like that card system mentioned, we now have just the whole voter list for the state in one place, and we
Hmm.
can pull based on a search result an export from an Excel doc from those lists, and
Oh,
we can look
nice.
for individual voters as well based on name or the name of the street. and various other things. Though it's a big list, so it seems to take forever to load anything. So it's hard to know if it's working or not. I had to wait 5 minutes to see, and then it loaded the whole list.
Wow.
It's not the most intuitive software because it's basically probably built from the ground up or something like that. And the instructions are written by, a techie guy. So, but I just wanted to relate that, and that there are tools that being in an organization really does help you do that. If you're on your own, you have to worry about the list, make your own lists, or ask the Board of Elections. Organizations mean that you can have master docs like that and resources that are shared, because now before every county would have to get their own list. Now they can go to this master list and oh yeah, and that it's a database that we can all with our counts edit. We can put in comments for voters. So we have that the big shoebox of index cards that can spread out for the whole state.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to discuss before the chapter and this documentary, Anytown, USA. So it's about it's like many documentarians, they focus on the human story, like we just not want a nice story. It's not really about explaining how local politics works or the history of things or even the town. It barely talks about anything about the town. I had to squint to find details, like a map of the town on the wall, to even look at what the shape of the town was or how many streets it was. It's basically a town of 4,000 voters or so. But you have this three-way race between a Republican mayor, a Democrat with zero charisma. The Republican, of course, is not well liked, or at least not well liked by Democrats in town, but they are outnumbered by Republicans. It's one of those takes of it's a numbers game, and you have the wild card write-in. The movie spends 60% of the movie around him because it's like his story. Both the Republican incumbent and the write-in candidate are both legally blind.
Oh,
so that's what makes it novel. And the write-in is, to sum it up, this is my take. He probably knew somehow that he had survived a brain tumor, but he had limited time left. And so he did this writing campaign as this last hurrah to say, I'm here, and to do something. And it was kind of nebulous, his reasons for doing so. It's not like he had a platform. He was basically he was the popular jock in high school and a football star. And he had not done anything else in his life, mostly because of his disability. But I mean, he was able to function all right. But that's the kind of town it is. And the filmmaker does a parallel between the campaign, and it's just the campaign season, just a few months, I think, and the football season with the local team, because based on cuts to the school district. So it's a small town of 5,000 or 6,000 people, but they have their own school district. They have their own school. Because some school districts can be very small, but it means that the local tax base has to fund it all.
Yeah, that's true.
And that means if you have a Republican mayor, they're we need to cut things, or we need to balance the budget. And so the team might have been cut, and that's what got a lot of people angry. But once the team wasn't cut, everyone's kind of fine. And so it's you can say he was going to cut it, but we mobilized against him. And this is a continuation of it. Now, 20 minutes in, I know right away the incumbent is going to win. So the drama of the rest of the movie, where it's the horse race and it's meant to be high, drama, is kind of ruined for me because I just know better. It's kind of like when you know all the tropes of a fantasy movie, you just know how it's going to play out. So the tells are that he actually has a Republican committee that's organized. The Democrats have an organization, but it's weak sauce. You just don't see it expressed in the movie. The filmmaker didn't shoot any film of Democrats doing things.
No.
So, or the candidate except him talking, and the Democrat is literally like this old Italian mob boss energy,
Oh.
Sopranos energy, and and he has no charisma whatsoever. He was like, he's the reluctant challenger. He didn't really want to run, but like there's enough angry people, and he was the most qualified Democrat in town because he had held office before. And oh yeah, and the Republican wanted to basically merge their school with the larger, not the county, but like the neighboring larger towns. But this would have also absorbed their high school football team, and that's why it's like, save our football team. This is why we need our own school. Because the beginning has these teenagers give the most weak sauce, immature answers for why, like, I don't want to finish my high school years somewhere else. I want to do it in the high school. Well, obviously, it's not going to just end with you. It's going to like be phased.
Yeah.
But it's like somebody's going to have to switch over mid high school. But guess what?
Right.
Millions of students have to do that. But so you have these white people just like, I'm special, nothing uncomfortable ever should happen to me. But that's everyone in town. So, which is why most of them are Republicans, and they're also older.
Mm-hmm.
But so it showed though that he had his own polling center. He was doing polling, and this was filmed in like 2002 or something, like right after 9/11, which doesn't come in very much, but he had his own polling team, and they basically had a room of teenagers doing phone banking just to poll. And I'm like, oh, wrap it up. Like he's already won. He has like 3 times as many volunteers or he has the money to pay teenagers to do polling in a town of 4,000, or whatever much it was, 4,000 voters. So you're only ready to call that many. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that. It wasn't like the writing campaign guy. He brought in the guy who managed Jesse Ventura's campaign, and he goes around trying to help independent candidates. So that's his shtick. And he was kind of called in as a special consultant to manage his campaign. And it's great to have a campaign manager. But like the mayor probably has a campaign manager. Was he featured prominently? It wasn't an interesting story. So I'm like, you're more concerned with telling an interesting, fun story where he gets, the writing candidate. It's like, and the whole, I don't know what lies are being told the camera, but it kind of makes it look like he's gaining. He has all this support. There's all these people talking to him, and they like him, but they don't really vote for him. They don't actually like think he should be mayor. He gets like 50 votes, or it was like 60, 70 votes after everything he did, which is still kind of good. It means it's a good base for the next run, really. But the thing is, it ends. The epilogue is him getting a brain and dying a month after the election.
Oh, wow. That's a twist.
But it's also like he's doing this because he knows his time is up. And like this is the last year he has on Earth.
Gotcha.
Is what I'm thinking. But the look of dejection and horror on his face when he learned that like he lost or he didn't even do that well. But it's fun. It's not like there were that many votes. It was like 2,000 votes for the incumbent, 1,300 votes for the Democrat, and so on. So, but he was relieved that like he wasn't a spoiler candidate. That if you took his votes and add them to the Democrat, that he still wouldn't have won. And this was like this great relief.
Yeah.
But that's all racist. That's all, so-called spoilers. It never actually happens. It always comes up short of the winning candidate who actually is well-funded. Oh, yeah, and he was the only candidate that Republican mentioned how much he actually had. He said, like, I got 25,000 just at the start. The others didn't mention at all what they had. I'm guessing they didn't raise any money, but apparently they had enough for signs. They had enough for material, but probably not anything else. So that was kind of interesting. But like as soon as he said I have 25,000 and I'm doing polling, and the Republican committee publishes their own newsletter that's a fake newspaper, and they distribute it on the main street, and it basically has like headline like reverse onion headlines, if you can imagine them. They're like Democrat kills baby, or like Democrats cheer 9/11 or something, kind of thing. Or phrasing things the worst possible way. It's their thing. Okay, so on to chapter 4. Chapter 4, the political campaign.
Let's get into it.
The purpose of a campaign. Well, maybe the intro. Political organizations work day in and day out all year round to achieve their primary goal, and that's winning elections, which to me is actually, well, what do you do once you win the elections? I think the organization should also be like,
seems a little
like,
backwards.
what do you do when you're in office? What's the ideology? So that's all kept out of the equation with this business document here. No matter how much emphasis party leaders place on the necessity for year-round programs, however, it is inevitable that political activity will reach a peak in the campaign period before Election Day. More people are directly involved in elections than might be thought. It has been estimated, and this is back in the 50s, it is estimated that in congressional election year, some 750,000 elective officials, ranging from U.S. Senator to municipal councilman, are chosen by voters. Assuming that there are 2 candidates for each position, approximately 1.5 million people are seeking an elected office. Candidates for major offices will have a large organization behind them, even though seeking minor offices may have several workers helping them or their cause. Thus, millions of people are directly involved in political campaigns. And the election is the payoff for the candidate or party. When you become active in politics, you will sooner or later find yourself working in a campaign. Political status and influence is determined largely by one criterion. Can you get votes for the ticket? As a result, your standing within the party will depend in large measure on how much you can contribute to the success. So the purpose of a campaign. Every political campaign is different in some ways from the one that preceded it. Candidates change, public opinion and issues shift. A campaign in one locality is a campaign in some areas, nomination by one party is tantamount to election. In those areas, the bitterest, most hard-fought battles may take place within the party prior to a primary. In other areas, the candidate can devote virtually all his time and attention to the general election because endorsement by a well-organized party has assured him that he will have little or no opposition in the primary. In area, the campaign will focus attention on issues that are different than emphasized in industrial city, yada yada. The organization of a political campaign is geared towards the major task of earning votes. So we return back to the concept of the tripartite saints, sinners, and salvageables. A worker in a campaign is convinced of the righteousness of his cause. He is convinced that his side represents truth, sense, and good government, and that the only way to achieve these goals is through the election of his ticket. As the pamphlet on the political precinct explains, the voters can be easily divided into these 3 groups. Saints, quite naturally, are those on the campaign workers' side. They are the people who are they're partisans, is basically. The sinners are comparable to the saints, except that in one particular, they're on the other side. Salvageables include the quote-unquote independents, those who have weak party loyalties, so they're registered for one of the major parties, but they're like, oh, I'm a registered Democrat, but I voted for Trump, or they're Reagan Democrat. They're a Democrat that the Democrat has to be conservative, basically. Right. And if they're not conservative enough, they will vote Republican. Or they will vote Democrat locally because that is like what matters. And then they'll vote Republican for national and state elections. They hate wokeness or something. So, but also, independents include those, or salvageables, those completely indifferent to politics because they feel their vote doesn't count or it doesn't make any difference which side wins. Now, of course, when it comes to the 2-party system, they are correct. Or rather, unorganized, yes, your vote doesn't count. The point is, and this comes up again and again in this pamphlet, that winning an election means getting your voters out. But you have to have voters first. You have to have people who are organized in a faction. So, so the ultimate kind of, and this is what's bubbling in my mind and kind of causes every time there's discussion turns to how do we as online leftists get more people to be leftists? How do we convert more people? How do we get people out of the pipeline? I'm like, I would rather focus on organizing the leftists that exist now, because we can keep building out the people with anti-capitalist views, but if we're not organized, it's meaningless because we are powerless to affect anything. And that is what has occurred the last 4 to 8 years. We have had all these baby leftists, and some of them, only maybe a minute proportion, are actually organizing or in organizations. Because you don't have to be an organizer. If you just pay dues to an organization, you're most of the way there, as far as I'm concerned. And putting a few hours in here and there, whatever. It's just a matter of choosing what organization, and maybe that if that's the choice people are grappling with, fine. But it's like people are really indecisive because they're trying to like figure out what's works or what will be the fastest thing to work. There's no right answer to that, though. It all works, but you have to do it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just all in the abstract forever.
Yeah.
It's so, come the revolution. Then
that's the thing with like even the Bernie campaigns. It could mobilize a lot of people, but because it was just a campaign, it wasn't actually organizing people. I mean, it's organizing people for the campaign.
For that singular purpose, yeah.
Right, but just for that campaign. And that's what us Greens or socialists were saying, like, the whole way through, was like, this is still people sinking their time and energy into Democratic Party politics. So it turns people off. But it's joined by the idea that we can only have an impact within the Democratic Party. So you create your own double bind of this is the only way that matters if we're involved, but when we're involved, we're just wasting our time. So we need to just do independent organizing in the workplace or place-based organizing. But to me, organizing on the municipal level is a type of work place-based organizing. It's just a problem in that you can realistically petition locally for local office independently. It is still an enormous amount of work, and you still need a good cadre of comrades to do it with.
People behind you.
And to me, just doing it with a party name, a label, it just seems like the proper thing to do.
Yeah.
But then it becomes a cart or horse of we have to work our butts off to get the ballot line, and then we will organize people to be in the Greens and use it. Because even when we had the ballot line, you had all these progressives that didn't care. They were more interested in being Bernie-crats. And that will be, I think that cycle is going to repeat in the next 2 years. I really think Bernie should say if he's going to run or not now, and not wait till after the midterms. I don't know what, don't wait, because as it's mentioned, it's mentioned in a later part here. So let's continue. But so the next page is about concentrating on the saints. At first glance, it might appear that because the saints are already inclined to support the party's candidates, most attention during the campaign should be focused on converting the sinners and the salvageables. Practical politicians, however, meaning realistic and, successful politicians, have learned in the hard school of experience that most attention should be given to the saints. While it is true that these people favor the candidates, many of them will not bother to vote unless they are stimulated to action in a vigorous campaign. They need a call to action. They need some people are motivated to act on their own, but that is a minority. That's your 50 to 100 votes when you need 1,000. Most important, they must be convinced that they have a winner. Simple math will help illustrate the importance of the saints. In 1952 and 56 presidential elections, approximately 60% of the eligible voters went to the polls. In the official year elections, 1954, only 44% of eligible voters cast their ballots. Translate these figures into work at the county level. Suppose there are 5,000 eligible voters. 44% of them go to the polls. That means 22,200 ballots will be cast. For a majority, a candidate only needs 1,100 votes, slightly more than 22% of the total electorate. Which is why, like, there's this mindset like you need a majority of all voters somehow. But
Yeah.
obviously, the cynical political operatives know that you just need a minority of a minority. And I think a lot of people already know this as well, and that's why they are cynical about politics in general, that it's a minority of minority voting in the first place. And that's just how illegitimate elections really are as far as calling them democratic.
That's for sure.
But the American conceit, or it's sort of tied with meritocracy, that like, well, it's based on merit, meaning people, you have to actively participate. And if you're not, then whatever, it's your choice. It was their choice to participate or not. Barring all the material circumstances involved with that. But it's just interesting that I know that I think Australia has mandatory voting, or
they do, yes.
So, or yeah, it's mandatory, right? You have to actually pay a fee if you don't.
You pay a fine if you don't.
Yeah, but
I don't know how often it actually gets enforced, but
it's nominal. It's like $5, right?
Yeah.
There are a few areas in the nation where the candidate of either major party does not have the potential support of 1/4 of the electorate. Either candidate, therefore, has a good chance of being elected if his campaign creates enough enthusiasm among his supporters to get each of them to the polls. You only need your supporters to show up, really, to win, is the point. If all the socialists came out and did something, we would shake society.
Oh, absolutely.
But we actually have to organize to do that
the work,
thing.
Yeah.
And show up. And that means asking each other. So a major purpose of the campaign, therefore, is to instill so much enthusiasm among some of the important supporters that they will ring the doorbells of others, babysit, and carry on all the other activities that will ensure that every saint does vote. You have to watch. Oh, I can't vote. I have to watch my kids, or I can't take my kids to the polls or something, which is dumb. But Ed Flynn, longtime Democratic political leader, as this pamphlet quotes him a lot, it must be always remembered that the people who are going to get out the vote in the election districts are regular organization people. If they are enthusiastic, these men and women get out the vote. They will see to it that every advantage is given to their ticket, such as helping those enrolled in their party get to the polls, calling of voters, and so on. In practice, of course, no campaign succeeds in getting every supporter of a candidate to the polls. Some of the lukewarm saints defect. The second largest amount of time and emphasis in the campaign, therefore, is directed at the salvageables. Okay. Fortunately, so here's a little table, which is a question: have you voted for president? So, independents pretty much. Let's see. Okay. Right. Never mind. Not important. Fortunately, much of the effort directed towards getting the hardcore organization enthusiastic, keeping morale up, and convincing its members that they can win the election also helps convert the salvageables. Some independents will jump on the bandwagon because they are followers. Sheeple. You're sheeple. Got to be a winner first, right? If you're not a winner already, then what's the point? Bernie Sanders, he's not winning. He's not a winner. And even when he was winning, most Dems would say, but he's not going to be able to beat Trump. Right, and they were so convinced of this, they just had to vote for Biden in the primary.
Just had to.
Yes.
And
thus, since Flynn was a winner, then every sock dem and dem sock, an anarchist had to vote for him.
Yeah.
Because it pains me that, like, how much we hate the two-party system, but so many lefties online that I watch will use two-party system talking points to say, what else can we do? There's no other choice. stuff like that. Very defeatist stuff. I really hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they say to an aside like Green Party doesn't matter, Green Party are losers, then at least I know they're coming from an honest place, that they're just being well, they're still being defeatist, but again, okay. So next. In addition, special appeals are frequently used to reach salvageables who are members of certain groups such as lawyers, professionals, farmers, labor, and vets. Often such loosely knit organizations are called letterhead clubs because appeals for support of a candidate are sent out on their club letterhead that carries the name of the sponsors. They are not, of course, true clubs, only campaign devices to appeal to special groups of salvageables. So they're not actual, or like they're not actual civic society clubs, but like, veterans for X. Mentioned this. You actually
trying to make you
make up. It's
trying to make you feel more important so that you get involved.
Turfing.
Yeah.
AstroTurfing. So the same type of appeal is carried a step further in the Citizens for Who's It clubs that are even more highly developed campaign orgs outside the party fold. Citizens for Who's It clubs offer a method for obtaining campaign workers who will back a man but shy away from affiliation with a party, because they're independent people. They're thinkers. They're independent thinkers. They're not joiners. But they like this person because it's a popularity contest.
Yeah, so vote for the person, not the party.
Yeah, they're political children, immature, whatever. But many political observers, however, say that the undoubted ability of these independent clubs to influence voters and to raise money may be offset by an inherent weakness. So Raylan Moley, in his book, The Political Responsibility of Businessmen, points out, volunteer groups, of which the most unfortunate example was the Associated Clubs of America in 1940, can annoy and dispirit the regular organization to the point of disaster for both the amateurs and the professionals. Seeds of frustration are almost shorted by an organization calling itself something like Independence for Who's It. Such mushroom movements usually die after elections, and the job then becomes even more arduous in maintaining support for an elected candidate, or in the case of defeat, in preparing for the next round. Was our revolution started after 2020 or 2016? It started after 2016, wasn't it?
I think so. That and also
the thing was
People's Party.
It was weird. I gotta look it up, I guess. But did Bernie Sanders give any explicit? Because he's not a guy to order anyone around. But did he suggest that people? 2016 says Nally. Did he suggest after the 2016 loss, everyone needs to join our revolution so we can prepare for the next time? I'm not sure that happened.
I don't remember.
Our revolution is basically made up of people who were already politically active, but are Dem Soaks or Bernie Krats, and they have made a habit of never endorsing a third-party candidate. Though I think that might be changing. I don't. Maybe just they have exceptions, but it's a matter of chat. But yeah. So, but there's every Bernicrat should join our revolution if they're serious about, continuing the fight. But it seems they were so much demoralization with the loss that and the need to beat Trump, I guess, that it just becomes Democratic Party activism, and then boom, they won. The sheepdog strategy worked. With the promise that Bernie Sanders could ran his campaign the way he ran it, with the person he is. So, but organization is the key. Let me go on. So, regulars are quite understandably afraid that much of the money used by the auxiliary would otherwise have gone to their organization, which they have loyally held together in bad times and good. So, in our context, what counts as auxiliary organization and what counts as the party organization, right? We don't want to give our money to the Democrats. Even, let's say you're a Sanders fan. You don't want to give your money to the Democrats, so you give it to our revolution, right? which is still, or the DSA, which is still which is ostensibly are auxiliary groups. They're
Yeah.
socialist for the Democratic Party,
Right.
which is, which is confused and complicated by all of the MLs and anarchists that joined the DSA after 2016. And our revolution is more consistently progressive Dems. So less attention in the campaign is devoted to the sinners. Converting them is too difficult. That is generally an uneconomical use of time. I mean, you can talk to right-wingers in some circumstances, but not when you're actually to win something.
Yeah, that's just slowing you down.
Can be hoped for is that they will become so discouraged, will slack their efforts to get others to vote. Most politicians try to discourage, like how cancer gets conservatives to not talk about their opinions in public. I don't know. Okay, not that funny. Yeah. Most politicians try to discourage. The most politicians try to discourage the opposition workers by issuing glowing victory predictions during the campaign and by similar techniques, which this was written in the 50s, and of course, the playbook has not changed at all.
Right.
You just have MSNBC blasting how bad Bernie's doing, or basically not, if ever mentioning any socialist or Green Party or whatever, or any opposition, it's always like how badly they're doing, or just how small, insignificant.
Or what embarrassing thing they said next.
Or how overwhelming, the support is in public opinion for capitalists or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Let's feature Elon Musk fans, for 80% of the time, right? So
the worst fans.
It gets the morale of us guys like us down because it feels like we're surrounded unless we touch grass and talk to people around us that there's a really good amount of people that, think like we do.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're only like media, even in general, even if it's all leftist media, it still creates a sort of mind tunnel. So now the going over of the typical campaign organization, with a party organization, but ideally it should be the same organization. I really, one of the things I had to try to evolve, it was kind of Howie's thing, was that in the past, our presidential campaigns were their own organization because they were based on name power. Ralph Nader, he could raise a lot of money, get a lot of fans involved, and so on. But it did nothing to grow the Green Party. It did nothing to build it was an auxiliary organization for the most part. Jill Stein sort of did the same thing. She could raise a lot of money and she got media attention, but
a little bit.
There was very little impact on building locals. It didn't really give us a boost. So the ultimate aim of the presidential campaign is to get enough votes in various states to guarantee ballot status, which in 2016, we got like 5 more ballot lines in states. Problem is, because of the laws, you have to keep getting that amount of votes every cycle. If you don't, if you slip just a little bit, because you just made it in before, you lose that ballot line. And so we're kind of back where we were back in 2014, or 2010 even. We're in, it feels bad. It feels bad, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So the organization of a national campaign will be different from that of a local school board. In some campaigns, the county chairman, county political org may run the whole show with an iron hand, never a fist hand. In other cases, an individual candidate may set up an elaborate machine because the local party machinery doesn't exist, or which is the case with kind of the Green Party. A lot of areas, they don't have any local. So the Jill Stein campaign or the Howie Hawkins campaign, which didn't really happen, would set up its own statewide, coordinator and stuff. Candidates who are thoroughly versed in the art of politics may make all major decisions on strategy. Inexperienced candidates will turn over to a politically experienced manager. Sound familiar? Despite all these differences, it is still possible to draw up a composite organization chart that is valuable for the purposes of illustration. So here's a nice vertical chart for you.
Okay.
Okay. Essentially, you can think of them or horizontally speaking in that you just have a bunch of working groups. So you have a working group for volunteers, one for research, one for canvassing, one for speakers. Goes through all these things, one for public relations. Next section is about the campaign manager. I will just sum it up that should not run their own campaign. It's a general rule of thumb, and it's something I can attest to. It really sucks to run your own campaign, especially when your time needs to be spent being either a
Yeah.
spokesperson or just being a public face or just going out and talking to people.
Right.
Someone else should be managing it or
Yeah.
coordinating. You can't do both.
Can't do it all. Yeah.
But on the other hand, something also talking about running for office is that whatever kind of party or kind of politics you have locally, that the winner is the one who's kind of already doing the work. Like, and when you're a council person, your job is to interact with the city departments, to interact with the social clubs and the civil society groups, and to generally have a sense of the issues and legislate. And you kind of, like most jobs that you want to be hired for, you kind of already either need to be doing it in a smaller or equal capacity.
Mhm.
In which case, if you're doing it in equal capacity, like you're doing everything your current council person does, then you're basically doing like dual power. You know, you're doing, and this is why electoral politics, I don't think it's a different game than doing dual power strategy or
Oh, I
base
agree.
building. They're really all the same thing.
Should be. Yeah.
You build dual power by acting like someone already in government or building your own government,
Right.
and then that's what allows you to run and win, because you've built up the relationships with city departments, let's say the contractors, all of these players. Now they all might be corrupt, and that's where you're just kind of playing the game to get along. In which case, dual power and building up your own governance means going to forces in the city that aren't these corrupt, and you have to organize them from scratch and from the ground up, whether they be workers, and then that's your base for running for office. In this case, of course, you're not running for office. The union's running for office, and it's you as just if not you, but a member is going to do it, and it could be anybody. And that's where it's like we are all the leaders kind of come in. It doesn't matter which, but it's got to be one of the organizing team or something, like Chris Smalls. But Chris Smalls has a whole committee behind him, and we should probably all have a list of their names so we can rattle them off. But like we do police shooting victims.
Yeah.
Campaign manager. So it lists off the qualifications of a good campaign manager. Basically, insulate the bad news or harassment, things that demoralize the candidate.
Keep them on track. Yeah.
And keep them on track. Just keeping them on track is the main. Maybe like certain candidates will want to rush from thing to thing, but it's like, no, you're going to do this. You're canvassing. And I was hired. This was my experience and got me like out of the Democratic Party. Is I was hired by a Democratic councilman. He wasn't a councilman. He was running for council. And I was his campaign manager. But I was like, no, I'm your intern. You're supposed to order me around. He wanted me to order him around, but he didn't want to take orders either. So it was a contradiction there. But check out this.
Like a lot of friction.
It was a lot of it was a cross between me quitting and him firing me. But really, it was a matter of I would quit, but I didn't tell him, and it's not like he had money to pay me, so it's not like I was stealing from him, but I was basically wasting his time and using his internet, I guess. So,
how did he end up doing? Just out of curiosity.
I thought I covered this story. He got 70 votes in the general after getting roughly 400 in the primary. So Why? Because we spent 2 months doing his 40th birthday party and not campaigning. So we did not turn out his base. He had a base, or he had people who liked him or supported him. People he did favors for. He basically did hundreds of favors as a paralegal, helping doing eviction defense or whatever. But it seemed to be all a means to an end for him. And because he didn't have any agenda, he didn't have any platform. So it's like, how am I supposed to sell you? How am I supposed to get people to care?
What do you do?
What do you like?
Yeah.
In
What do
our
you put on a
case,
flyer? Jeez.
and he spent our time going negative, and I'm like, we don't need to go negative. We need to vote for you. But I wasn't confident enough to just say these things because I was still green, a newbie. His priorities were very mixed up. I mean, he was technically homeless at the time. And
wow.
instead of worrying about like getting a stable place to live, because the thing was, he was like, he saw himself as this, well, it was sort of pseudo his own fault, but also like there probably are machine forces that are like getting him evicted and whatnot like that. And it is a sad story. I think he's doing better. I do run into him now and then, but very seldom. I do not like looking him in the eye because we parted on very bad terms. Like he was screaming at me, and I'm like, "Fuck you, buddy." Because he would coalesce and rant about like there's a lot of black politicians do this where it's like, I feel like I'm running my people into the burning building, or I'm keeping them on the plantation or whatever, and I'm like, then do something else. Then don't play this game. You know why? Because his opponent was also a black guy, but he was a cop, you see. And so he had policemen stealing his signs and doing all the kinds of things. It was hopeless. Especially because he didn't have a full team helping him. He had people like coming around to like do favors, but that's all he had. He didn't really have full friends. Didn't have real friends, which really sucked. Because then it responded about like he had his 40th birthday party, which was a fundraiser, but it was a week and a half a day, and it was just it was dumb. It was just a social event, but it's like, oh, you have these so-called friends that didn't help me. I'm like, why didn't they help you? They, you brought them in basically wasn't that to ask them to basically help volunteer for the last 2 weeks? But he didn't actually know how to organize. He was still kind of doing it.
Sounds that way, yeah.
I would say he was a moderate centrist kind of guy because I'll put it this way. In the neighborhood and the electorate, which is still majority black, if not all black, are still mostly the voting black population is still pretty conservative. He's bi, and he wasn't out of the closet. His justification being that it would make him unpopular with his base.
Yeah.
And that just made me think so much less of him. I'm like, he couldn't be true to who he was. This is in 2013. I'm like, you can't be out. Gay marriage is legal, man.
Yeah, right.
But this neighborhood actually didn't like that, or at least the older folks
that's
wouldn't like it. And he was having grinder dates on the side and whatever.
Oh, because that couldn't blow up in your face on the campaign, if that's the way that it came out.
Well, what I mean is he was doing that instead of campaigning.
Well, I'm just saying too,
Not to point him as a complete douchebag. He has disabilities like neuropathy. What's the thing where you fall asleep? Narcolepsy. So he had a bad sleep schedule, if any. He couldn't drive himself, so I was acting as chauffeur.
Sure.
So it was an interesting experience. It really got me out of the party because after that, it was just like I saw all the ugliness of running in that world in the way they think. Because this was the nice Democrat that reached out to like a guy like me, an occupier. because that's what I was coming off of.
Mm-hmm.
And he was more progressive than the cop, of course.
Yeah, not hard.
But the cop had a longer resume, because he had been doing the community policing, and he was like
Serving the community. For all those years.
he was one of the major community liaisons and whatever. And now he's the guy who's the most stalwart defender of using tear gas
Oh,
for the city.
yeah. So I mean, if you're a defender of what is considered a war crime in any other country, then yeah, I guess.
Let's not take away the tool.
Progressive.
Let's not take away the tools from the police to let's not. They need every tool they should have. Because how it's because we're not an army, but of course the state troopers are always around the corner. State troopers were made to bust up unions in the Victorian era. So anyway, there's this nice little graph, which so that black bar there, that's non-voters. So sharp rise here. Can you guess what that sharp rise represents? I'm covering the years. The years are on the x-axis.
I can't really make out any of the text, so.
Okay. Non-voters. What year do you think this sharp rise is?
Oh. I'm going to guess around Reagan era.
This is the 20th century.
Oh, okay.
And you're kind of getting ahead of yourself. Remember, this was published in 1964. Okay.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's when white women got the vote.
Oh.
Yes.
And that boosted voter apathy, huh?
Well, no, it just meant that there was the number of eligible voters went from 30 million to 60 million. It doubled the amount of eligible voters.
But they just,
and
took them a while to get into voting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If at all. Yeah. Which is kind of odd. But that's 1916. But so a fun fact that probably not many people know of because it's not part of American history as it's taught in high school, that we had very late in the country, were the removal that you needed to own property to vote.
Yeah.
Can you guess when? I can't play the quiz game because I don't know the exact year and details because it probably depended on which state. Right. But I do remember that it was in the progressive era, or rather the 1890s, when there's a populist party, third party was pushing for this stuff, that we had the direct election of senators. Until the 1890s, individual voters did not elect senators. Senators were chosen by the party or the delegation. So just directly electing senators was like a big, at least some kind of reform. It didn't really change a lot, of course. But it's not, So, yeah. But anyway, what this graph relates is that the two lines down here are the actual voters of both parties. And the white space between is the people who can vote, like they're registered, but aren't regularly voting. I'm sorry, no, it's the actual vote. So that's independents. Because independents, no party, are roughly like, just as large as the other two.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Split pretty
if they were organized in their own party, it would be a third party. But the thing is, they're all ideologically confused in various
all
ways.
Over the place.
I mean, they actually are the wiffle waffle.
Mm-hmm.
And but you have that eligible to vote, and that's the case the Green Party makes all the time. Like, look, we're going after this black mass here. Those are the people that were at least like, okay, there's two kind of campaigns, and there's a campaign that's a shit ton more work, but there's a campaign where you just go after the people who are voting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're we call them the prime voters. They're the people who vote every year or every other year, in the midterms, for example. And these are the partisans of the major parties, not independents, not non-party people. They don't vote every election. They only vote for president or maybe in the midterms or just the times, but not in the local elections or whatever. They're so open-minded, they don't do any. They're mindless. They need a full news cycle to tell them that like they should, that they might have to vote for something, or family members screaming at them. But there's all these non-voters that are disengaged, and they really just like, because no one talks to them. Because see, in general electioneering, nobody talks to them. They're not on the list because they're not they're not registered or they're not eligible. This is why Acorn was so important, because they actually registered people. So that's the thing. You can give people the right to vote, but you still need to spend resources to register them, unless you just make it like automatic, which is the next big reform, which
should be
somehow Democrats didn't act on at all. They focus on mail-in voting, and that's like we're expanding voting rights, while Republicans remove voting rights. But it's like, this isn't good enough. Just allowing for more mail-in voting, that only helps the old people who already vote.
Right.
Although it did, when everyone got a vote ballot in the mail, if they were registered, it did increase voting.
By a lot,
But that was money that had to be spent during the pandemic to send everybody a ballot. It's a lot of mail. It is a lot of mail. So another important qualification of okay, so we're still talking about campaign managers. I'm going to skip ahead. In short, the campaign manager should have the knowledge and skill of the professional politician, the administrative ability to delegate authority, and at the same time maintain control and leadership to inspire a group of volunteers to work hard without friction. Raymond Maloney, who was delegated by President Roosevelt to handle all matters related to the issues, speeches, and statements of the 32 campaign, has described how that master politician worked. It is astonishing that Roosevelt so ordered the various divisions of his political activity, so sharply delegated authority, and so clearly maintained personal contact with each of us, that there was never the semblance of never an overlapping of function. This was a mark of superb administrative ability in the political field. Now, of course, this goes into the myth of kind of great man theory, that like you don't have conflict within an organization if you just have a strong man who's able to have the charisma to just give orders and people follow. But I know firsthand you can have an horizontal. You still need coordinators, right?
For
captains, as the Pirate Party calls them, and that itself is like the campaign manager at its best, because a lot of the rhetoric with this section is all about how they're the boss, they're a good boss, a good manager. But you can replace this with the language of the coordinator, someone who just needs to keep track of who's doing what needs to be done, what is being done.
Yeah, makes sense.
So now, women in the campaign.
Ooh.
Women always play a key role in political campaigns. It's nice how there always has to be a separate section for the women, right? Sex segregation. You got to have that sex segregation, because women are, they have smaller bodies. They're not able to campaign like men. See when you have that logic with sport, with trans and sports, and you actually apply it across the board. That like, then let's just segregate all sex. Like why do we have intermodal schools? We need boys' schools and girls' schools like Japan. And what have you. What was wrong with that? And look at all the problems. Like you get teen pregnancy and all, and STDs. And we have to have sex education, all this stuff that we didn't have to have before when we just kept them all separate but equal, right? Separate but equal.
Right, and famously, no one ever got pregnant in that time outside of wedlock.
I'm thinking any argument you can make for sex segregation, whether it be in sports or whatever, can be made for race segregation. Why not keep? And I'm saying this totally like sarcastically as well as like,
for sure,
not so serious, but just a hint that because the best argument I heard about women in sports is that they should be separate because women, there's an inequity, there's inequality between men and women that can be overcome if women's sports, or particularly women in general, have just as many resources, to develop their
Yeah,
bodies, to develop
that's a key
their
thing.
skills in sport. And because it's not just by the individual, it's an institution that
Absolutely.
this group that was not allowed to participate for
Uh-huh.
the century that sports existed, professional sports, and they need time to catch up, so they're going to be in a separate league. But wasn't that argument also made for black leagues? Or, I mean, no, that wasn't the argument. The argument was blacks need to be separate because they're inferior.
Yeah.
But inferior because of a reason that it was inferiority that didn't actually exist, except materially it does, like in wealth and whatever. There is inequality. So it's like and which is why there's black nationalism and how, like, you know, we support black businesses and we build up a black business community because they can't actually compete with a white business community.
Right.
Except we have this nation, so you have your Oprahs and Kanye, who succeeded and can compete, but of course they compete while struggling, while being crazy on the inside and rant, like when they speak out against, like, I'm competing at a disadvantage because either I feel alone because I'm black, or because there is this inequality where I started behind everyone else who's in the industry, whether it be fashion or whatever he was trying to get into. I'm talking about Kanye. Because even Oprah's media empire is still nothing compared to Murdoch's.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
You know, the Oprah News Network is not competing with CNN, even though it's still, a shadow.
Right.
So interesting. So just an interesting conversation there. It's a tangent.
It is, but yeah, just on that issue of sports, there's a reason that powers like or countries like the United States and China and other very large and well-funded sporting countries tend to win all the gold medals at the Olympics. It's not just a numbers game. It's not just because we have hundreds of millions of people. It's because we put our funding behind it as well. And
Bulgaria could win more medals if they took their military budget and put it in sports,
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But even if it did, they would still only have 100th of what the U.S. spends.
Right, but they, at least proportionally, in terms of world population, they would win, proportional number of medals, supposedly.
Exactly. But that's the inequalities of the world.
Yep.
But it's interesting to note, like, that as women's sports develop, there will be a time where there could be, or would be, assumed full integration, where there is no physical, at least when it comes to profession, no physical or performance-based differences. Now there are, but not in the future.
Well, an interesting note that I just found out about too is that the Paralympics have completely gender-integrated teams. So you'll see the wheelchair basketball team has people of all genders competing together, and so they've figured out how to do it. Where I guess they categorize things more by ability or disability, and then beyond that, they don't see the need to not have integration. So they can figure it out.
Right, in a way, it could be done across the board. That's why you have different levels of sports teams, right? You have, what are they called? Divisions. Division
different
one,
divisions.
Division one, Division two, Division three, with Division one being the best, I assume. I can give you a direct experience example. I played tennis in college, and City College was known for its basketball team. A lot of money, I guess, and resources were put. When it comes to our sports center, it's mostly gyms for basketball. And there's like this disaster. No, never mind. But not so much with tennis. In fact, we don't even have our own courts. We do have our own courts. They're on the roof of the basketball gym. But they were warped. They were unusable. I never actually. I could only see them from the air. Because it's Manhattan. It's verticality. That's why it's not unusual to have courts on the roof of something, because it's a plinth with a tower. block and whatever. And but so we ended up using for one of our practices. We used public courts. We went to Jackie Robinson Park, north of us, to use the courts there, across from Yankee Stadium, actually across the river.
Oh yeah.
But then we also got the use of Columbia University's courts, which are up in Inwood at the very north tip of Manhattan, which were indoor. They had the big bubble thing, that covers the courts. So we were able to do it inside because it was cold. It was early March, if not February. And but then as it got warmer, we used the public court once. But we didn't have a lot of practice time, and before our matches or between our matches, and we lost a lot. We were able to beat one other team, City Tech, and I think that's because they're the only other school that basically had no budget for the tennis team. Besides the use of a van to get to the meets, but I think we only used the van a few times. There was this one time, I don't know what the hell happened, but I think I was just taking the subway back from Brooklyn University, which took 2 hours.
Really?
Oh my God. If you're taking the subway from one end of the line to the other end of the line, it takes 2 hours.
Does it really?
It's a lot of stops. I mean, if it's not
I guess you're right. Sure.
Maybe I just took a nap and it felt like a long time, but but I think we took the van there and I had to take the subway back. I don't know what was up with that, but I don't remember at all. But I just remember when we played Brooklyn U, we were absolutely obliterated. They were just of us. I'm like, why are we playing this team that basically has these already professional players when we're basically we're hobbyists? I mean, we had 2 members of our team that I could say were the kind of players that were serious and they had been playing tennis like really seriously through their high school career and whatever. But the rest of our team were like, I was right in the middle, and I was just the person who had basically been doing it. I mean, I played in high school, but I was never in a match, for one thing. If I did, I think I was doubles, but I don't remember ever doing a match. But I was I was doing doubles matches in college, so we were able to do that. And I think there was one school maybe we came close or it was more even, but City Tech was the only one we actually won. Or everyone else just killed us because we funded team. We weren't like a team that got resources. We didn't have our own courts, so we couldn't practice daily or between classes or something like that. I couldn't really schedule it. It was only when we had designated practice time, so that we're only once a week. It's not enough to get good. Though I did get the most improved award. So
there you go. That's something.
It was. Going really slow through this. So, training schools for workers. For the last few years, state and national political orgs have increased their efforts to provide systematic training for political workers through schools of politics. I have never encountered these things, but I'm sure they do exist. They're just in PowerPoint presentation form or whatever. At the local level, too, the most effective political organization strives to improve their workers' skill by all kinds of training activities. So you kind of need your own working group just to do trainings. A day spent at the beginning of the campaign in a training workers can pay great dividends during the campaign. The primary purpose of these courses is to help those in attendance master campaign techniques, blah, blah, blah. So it lists all the different campaign activities. I'm just going to breeze through them. Mentions that you should have a headquarters. Every political campaign should have a headquarters. In small towns, this headquarters is located in a vacant storefront on Main Street. This is not only a convenient location, but permits continuous advertising by placing a banner across the front. The job of running, ideally, you just have a party headquarters on Main Street or in a storefront. So you have a storefront, and then that's where you run your campaigns out of.
Right.
The job of running the headquarters generally falls to a headquarters secretary, who is frequently a full-time paid employee. Usually a woman fills this job. Ooh.
Okay.
That's in parentheses.
In case you were confused, as who should we pick for this job?
Who should be running the headquarters? I mean, they're called a secretary, okay, not a headquarters manager. Not a
That's right.
manager. If they were a manager, it'd be a man.
Jeez.
Okay.
Oh.
Next is a volunteers chairman. Now, ideally, it'd be a working group, or at least you have at least a coordinator, right? So their responsibilities cover 4 areas: recruiting, assigning jobs, so delegating, what are you good at, what have you done before, or what would you like to do. Usually you have a volunteer form, and you have a checklist of like what would you think you could do and what would be interested in doing. Few volunteers are completely unusable. It is up to the chairman not only
But
to
some
have
are?
them
Jeez.
available when needed, but also to see to it that everybody who wants to help has an opportunity. Nothing is more discouraging than for a person to volunteer their services and never be called on to help. True.
True.
So it's like you need volunteers, though, to call potential volunteers. Number 3 is training. The volunteers coordinator also has a responsibility to train. And non-headquarters staffing. It actually says she should, but they should be on the lookout for potential precinct workers and other non-type of volunteers. After referring these people to precinct leaders or other chairmen, they should follow up to make sure the volunteer actually gets in touch with them, which is another step, which is kind of, it's annoying as hell. Not only do you have to kind of refer them, but then you check in a week later. Hey, did you call them? Okay, good. Oh, you did it. Can you do that?
Yeah, can you get on
It's
that?
like you have to ask them, hey, can you volunteer? Then it's like, hey, can you
Can
do
the
the
thing you said.
volunteering?
Yeah.
Like you have to follow up. You have to handhold. And so you have to treat everyone like a goddamn baby who's like they're non-adult that can actually manage their life and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to put aside the time to do it. But even I am susceptible to like, I have things to do and I procrastinate, I procrastinate, I procrastinate. And sometimes it's on purpose. I procrastinate so that time runs out and then it's like, oh, well, time's up. I can't do it now. Which is secret how I kind of feel sometimes about petitioning. Now I've given myself the goal of getting 100, which is kind of low number considering how many we really need. But with everything else I'm doing with my life, including the show and the radio,
Right.
like getting 100 is like the minimum. Like tag myself, like I can guarantee I can get that many, whether they're good signatures or not. Like there's a big festival in 2 weeks on Father's Day. I'm sure I can get half the like 50 there. I go to a few other events or the Food Not Bombs. I'll get another 10 there. I'll have 100 in no time. But there's also the whole like, and I could go to, and I like procrastinate through it, and then it's like, oh, I couldn't. But I'm really just deciding that I'm tired. I don't want to do it, or I'm too anxious. I won't lie. Petitioning makes me really anxious. I'm a little less anxious now, but it still does not leave me completely. Because I did some Friday on an Earth Day protest. But those are people who, are almost expecting to be out.
Yeah.
So next working group to cover is the Research Committee. In practice, the scope of the work Research Committee generally reflects the size of the National Committees of both parties are constantly analyzing issues and party prospects in various sections of the country. Now, I don't know if you need like speaking locally or even in leftist circles that you need a whole working group just to do research. Maybe just having one person and to have the homework of kind of doing an analysis, gathering documents and things and going over them. It's not like something that takes more than a day of doing it. But maybe it helps if you're an analytical mind who knows how to do research already.
Sure. So is it just building the talking points, or is it like fact checking and that sort of thing as well?
Well, this kind of is vague about it. It kind of seems to cover a lot, but it's mostly covering. This booklet makes it out to be more about just doing research for the campaign, strategy, opposition research,
Gotcha.
And let's see. Background material on issues and opponents can be compiled by the research committee and made available to the candidate and to other speakers. In addition, invaluable help can be provided to the campaign manager in his campaign and development of their campaign strategy. So, research to find answers to questions like how many voters are in the district? What's the population broken down by ward? What was the vote by ward and precinct in the last election? Are there concentrations of ethnic groups? Where will concentrated work get us the most votes? Just where should we spend resources? Since your primary purpose of the campaign is to ensure that voters on your side get to the polls, it is essential that the campaign manager know which areas and which groups are worth an all-out effort and which are not. You can spend the effort of getting lit to people and asking them to turn out the vote, or even when they are supporters. But if they don't regularly turn out, then it's actually not worth asking again. Ask the people that do regularly vote. But this, of course, creates a perpetuating cycle of reinforcing the people that you only need this group of people to vote for you, and everyone else can just go to hell because they didn't come to you or they don't participate already. But of course, it's they don't participate. They don't participate because no one's ever done outreach to them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just to say it's just a little conceited, but previous campaigns probably did outreach to them, and they still didn't come out. They were outreached 3, 4, 6, the full 6 times. They're also called like, hey, it's election day, come out and vote. And they still didn't. Then there's a record that they didn't vote in the last local election. Then the next time, they're not going to get those calls. So there is a collective responsibility to keep in mind that if you don't complain if you're not active, at least in the most basic ways, that you go to the voting booth and you just write in Eugene Debs for every candidate, for every office, or vote in the cavalcade of leftist heroes.
Sure.
And just do that.
I
say
least that.
Every cycle I say, if there's no one on the ballot you care for, you should still vote and write in as a vote of no confidence. Because in certain states or localities, there actually are rules that if a majority, not that they don't vote, but if they vote but they don't vote for any candidate, then the election is a vote of no confidence. Like if there's more people who voted but they didn't vote for this office, it nulls the election and they have to have another one.
Oh, wow.
Now, research has to be done if that's the case in your locality.
Yeah.
But I just say it anyway, just to get people to do it, it's a muscle, it's a muscle. You have to work it. The more you do it, like vote early, vote often. If you don't do it for years and years, it's like, I don't care. It's not like it matters. And at the current rate, it doesn't matter. When only, a few dozen people write in, nothing or don't vote for any. They fill out a ballot but leave it blank. You can do that too. That's a vote of no confidence vote, to leave to register that you voted, but you leave it blank. And it's okay because you have tons of races where people will only presidential. They'll only vote for president, leave the rest blank. Or they will. It's one office. It's for someone they like because of some popularity contest, and they'll also not leave the rest blank. Because say they're not on a part of a ticket, or they're not saying, "I'm a Democrat, you should vote Democrat." I mean, partisans will vote along the whole row. This is their thing. But I'm talking about all those independents, right? All those non-partisan voters who can't be bothered to fill out their whole ballot. Or notice that if there is a third party there that actually jives with them, but they don't know the candidate, so they'll actually say, "Oh, I don't vote for people I don't know about," but they didn't take the time to learn. Anyway, I'm not here to just rant about the voters, right? Again, it goes to the heart of electoral, this is a bourgeois democracy. So if you're not bourgeois, it's not for you. So
True.
that's
True
kind
enough.
of that sense is baked in, which is why a lot of working people just like, this isn't for me. The values aren't represented there. It's all bourgeois values only.
Mhm.
So that's why like the Greens kind of get this sense like we must be social democrats, because if we're participating in bourgeois elections, then we must be bourgeois-minded people, just middle-class hippies and what have you.
I don't know. I would say the opposite. Like, if they have a chance to capture any significant voter chunk, it's going to be the people that don't feel like they're represented by bourgeois politics.
Well, I know, but a lot of people. I'm just talking about the general perception of what the party
I
is.
understand.
When really, when we run for office, we want workers.
Yeah.
We canvass workers, or what have you. But at the same time, when we are running for local office, we print out walk sheets that are prime voters, but the prime voters are the most unlikely to vote Green. So it seems like when it comes to the guys I learned from, it's like I see some contradictions there. But they're not wrong when they say, but these are the people that vote the most often, and they're the people that are going to show up. So we need to reach out to them multiple times, build a relationship, and then build trust and whatever. Because all those non-voters or people who are registered and don't vote, they're still not going to come out no matter how many times we knock on their door. Because they're just not going to be motivated enough unless something is really getting their goat or something like that. But this is where maybe the strategy of we just need people to be really hardcore anti-capitalists and be motivated to do something. And so when an anti-capitalist is out door knocking and then it's a not regular voter, they're like, oh, hell yeah, some anti-capitalist. Not only will I want to be on the call list to be called on election day, but I will volunteer or I will donate money. Just being optimistic there. So the next working group, a part of a campaign organization, is the Speakers Committee. So you'll like this. This is a nice little nostalgic section here. Today, political programs must compete with all kinds of entertainment for public attention. Under the impact of radio and television, and political oratory has changed. Political speeches are not as long as they once were. In most cases, they do not include as much flowery verbiage.
Gotta dumb it down for masses.
I would say it hasn't. Flowery verbiage hasn't been dropped. The whole point of giving a campaign speech where you're not actually saying anything, or you are, but you're just giving buzzwords that have been studied to give a emotional response because it's advertising. Advertising infected campaign speechings.
It's like the Family Guy just repeating 9/11 and again.
11.
9. Yes.
But speech making is still very much, or in this case, in terms of the midterms, it's like inflation, bad.
Yes.
Brandon, good. Oh, no, sorry. Putin, bad. Ukraine, good.
Yeah. Pretty much.
It's always what did boost my morale as far as not feeling like a dipshit was that the anarchists of We Are Many were playing videos of people escaping Mariupol and basically pointing out that the Azov battalion wasn't letting them leave the city. So if there were civilian casualties in the war, because it is a war, it's a battle line.
Yeah.
But civilians do want to leave, but the Ukrainian military doesn't want people leaving because it's kind of like what was said with like Stalin or well, especially Hitler would not want anyone moving or escaping. Like, no. If you're gonna be raped by the Russians, like it's on you for not fighting hard enough or something.
Hmm.
And that's what it feels like. But it's countered with
Jeez.
pseudo propaganda, but also the reporting on the ground with like Channel 5, where he talks to people in Kharkiv, and he talks to people of all political persuasions, including going to the anarchist collective doing mutual aid, and how, when it comes to leftists in Ukraine, they're all very much just nationalists at the end of the day, where it's just like, no, we're Ukrainians and we don't like being invaded. I completely understand that. And so it's not like I have anything against them, but
Yeah.
the left in Ukraine is also being blackbagged by the government and suppressed and arrested. And so this whole thing about like Ukrainian government, good liberal democracy, that's not what this war is about. It is. I mean, you can just argue from the fact that sovereignty, from sovereignty and autonomy, that Ukrainians should be Ukraine for Ukrainians. But if we're just talking about like as far as an ethno-nationalism, that there's this area that's actually ethnically Ukraine, then that should be the borders of Ukraine. But we're fighting over Ukraine that's almost a greater Ukraine, which consists of these areas that are more ethnically Russian or Polish. And because this was land that was given to the state of Ukraine over time. So it's more complicated to me, but of course I'm just thinking of it almost like a fucking game of Hearts of Iron 4 or Hearts of Iron or European Universalis. Anyway.
I don't. Yeah.
Sorry, grand strategy games where there's a lot of different like geopolitical algorithms to play.
But for sure, it is not just as simple as Ukraine good, Russia bad. Absolutely true.
What is bad overly is that we are flooding the area with weapons, and we actually don't. Of course, like any kind of fog of war, once they hit the ground, we don't know where they go.
Don't know where they're going.
So
don't know what the long-term consequences.
They're going to be used to terrorize people for decades to come in Eastern Europe, and because if you're talking to right wingers about this, like, hey, you know how terrorists always have those AK-47s and all these arms and stuff? How do they get those arms? How do they get guns? And they're probably in their head, the propaganda is like, oh, Russia sold them. The evil Russians sold them these weapons long ago. Like, no, today it's actually mostly American weapons that they're using, or what have you. Or, but that's the same thing that we do to people. We give weapons out, and they make their way into the hands of the bad guys.
Right.
Those
brave mujahideen.
It's a market. If they're buyers, then who does it matter? Someone's got to make money.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when we were helping those brave mujahideen in Afghanistan fight against the Soviets.
Yeah, that's
ended up turning into.
That's the meme. That's the meme. Yep. Brave mujahideen fighters. Well, it's hey, in 40 years we'll be making jokes about the Brave Azov Battalion.
Yeah, I mean,
making their last like a lot of making their stand in Mariupol.
Right.
And I see footage of smoking buildings in a city that's not quite in ruins, but obviously it's been shelled.
Yeah.
And but not leveled, not like Syrian cities. So it's like it's bad, but it's like it doesn't horrify me because I know what Yemen looks like.
Yeah, right.
Or Iraq. Aerial footage of not Tikrit.
Mosul. Yeah.
Yeah, Mosul. But so what was the city we completely leveled? By we, it was actually Americans did it. Anyway.
No, Americans, yeah.
So on the other hand, sorry, I was actually wanting to read more of this.
Sure.
So during the campaign, requests that the candidate speak before this group or that club will flow into campaign headquarters. I don't really get that. requests don't really come to you. At least when you're an insurgent campaign, you kind of need to ask, "Hey, would you like to hear from our from candidate?" They don't usually say no, but sometimes it looks like their schedule's all filled up already. Talking to the police, whatever.
Sure.
I'm talking about neighborhood associations. During a campaign, requests that the candidate, by selecting the speaking engagements that the candidate will accept, the candidate and his manager will keep in mind the major goal of the campaign mentioned earlier, that is to get those people who support him to the polls. This means, for practical purposes, that a Republican candidate would spend little time in a precinct that has a long history of Democratic majority. He recognizes that the few votes he might change in that precinct would not justify the use of his limited time. He can devote his energy more constructively to making sure the voters who are at least sympathetic to his cause are inspired to increase their efforts to elect him, support him at the polls. So some of the candidates' appearances are almost thus like the Sanders rallies or Trump rallies. It's more about raising the morale of your base. I'm not sure, and that was kind of where I wasn't sold on Bernie Sanders' real popularity. It seemed like a lot of people going to his rallies, and when it came to on the ground interviews, it's like a good chunk of the people going weren't sold on Bernie yet, or
really?
They said things like, oh, okay, maybe they were sold on him, but they were like, I came here to learn more.
Yeah.
You're learning more about Bernie Sanders by actually going to a rally.
Going to a rally? Yeah.
There's no other media or information gathering you're doing. You're going to the rally to learn about Sanders and this platform. And it's like, okay, were you sold after hearing him?
Uh-huh.
What are the exit polls for the Bernie rally?
Right.
You did not have to do this with Trump. People who came to Trump rallies love Trump. And a lot of people came to Bernie rallies, love Bernie. So, I'm not saying it was but I'm just saying there was a section, I think. I just remember in various videos of people attending Bernie rallies, there would be people like that there. Who weren't all in or something, but waiting, they were on the cusp of being convinced or something. It was odd.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's odd.
During a campaign, requests of the sorry, I keep losing my place. So some of the candidates' appearances are also mandatory, of course. He will probably show up at any gathering which includes a large number of party faithful. He will always try to appear before veterans groups, labor meetings, religious orgs, chamber of commerce, and other well-organized clubs or associations. And this is also more about maintaining appearances and also not snubbing anyone. So even if it's a group that's are they really there do you really want to hear from you to get your support? It's more about you showing that you support them so they don't work against you, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's more like insurance, or like a social extortion.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
You got to kiss the ring or kiss some ass, show
right.
Show up to the veterans and say, I truly believe that your fight was the good fight or something.
That's right. Yeah.
And insert all the satire from The Simpsons, political satire you want in how campaigns happen. So it's people get turned off by all of that, so they don't do it or they don't want to do it. But then it's is there a better way? And at least in bourgeois elections, there doesn't seem to be another way.
Right.
Even AOC's campaign, which is did things differently, so to speak, but kind of didn't. It was still a close election, and they did a shitload of canvassing. And they were still just canvassing prime voters at the end of the day. And that's who came out to vote. That's what's interesting about the AOC, first AOC win, when you were looking at the numbers. And also that it wasn't just the DSA that was putting her over the top or something. There were a lot of orgs. So that were progressive in nature. So the Speakers Committee works, for example, with the research material that will be most useful and effective in campus. And it works with the public, basically, make talking points. Mm-hmm. But it kind of makes me think political should be more because Bernie bored me after a while. But maybe this is because I'm a cynical guy who politics for too much of his life. See, if say Bernie was the first politician you ever started listening to, then I guess hearing his full speech is rapturous. It was just I've heard all this before from Greens
Right.
who then would add anti-imperialist and things like that.
Right.
So it's like
I think
this is actually missing the mark.
That's the thing, is that Bernie was saying things that a lot of Democrats had not heard before.
Right.
Or at least in a long time.
Like, yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, especially if all you listen is NPR and Face the Nation, which I did as a teenager, and then I went to college and grew up, and found this thing called the internet, which provides all kinds of like some media creation. So anyway, so there's also the small informal gatherings. The subject of speakers and meetings brings up a recent development that revolutionizing campaigning in some areas. The small informal gathering. It has been said, for example, that Senator Jack Kennedy literally drank his way in tea into the Senate. I thought he was also a drunk.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. I thought that's where they were going when you first.
Yeah, he drank tea. So I guess he went to a lot of tea parties. As he met thousands of voters at a series of informal tea parties conducted by his mother and sisters throughout Massachusetts.
Okay.
These are probably very rich old money Kennedys. The Committee on Political Education, COPE, of the AFL-CIO, is urging use of this technique. As said, that neighborhood meeting in someone's house. So basically, it's referring to house parties. A name that's well, legitimized. So, but in the 50s, this was a new thing of having a house party. But now, for at least for third-party campaigning, it's actually the main events that we do. But house parties are also fundraising events as well. But it's more like, can you get at least 10 people? Because I think that was like the minimum number that like the candidate shouldn't show up unless there's at least 10 people at this party. The worst thing you can have is a house party where it's a Facebook event. You have 50 people interested, but then only 5 show up. I don't know if that happened once. It did. I just remember that feeling of like, or hearing about it happening. And I'm like, oh God. Or maybe it was just an innate fear of mine. Like if I have a house party, it's like, it's going to be like every other party or thing I've ever organized where there's a lot of people that are maybe interested. I get some going. I get like 20 going on Facebook, but really only 5 come.
Yeah.
And that doesn't cut it when the candidate has finite time and it's like
Absolutely.
It could be somewhere else. They could be canvassing. You want at least 10 people where it's worth it because those 10 people are going to donate $20 to $50. And that they are going to be, prime, one voters, sure things.
Yeah.
Or that you are gaining their support by kind of thing.
Okay.
So the success of such meeting in swaying voters is not surprising. The candidate immediately becomes a friend of the voter, human nature being what it is. So, you're like, he's a guy I can have a beer with. Well, if you literally have a beer with him.
There you go.
Which also kind of just means you could just go bar hopping. Just go from bar to bar.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
And it could probably have the same effect. Human nature, but see, I hate bars. I hate dry candidate. Can't do it,
Yeah.
Mr. Candidate told me the other day, or say casually, when I was talking to Mr. Candidate the other day at the Browns house. See, like at a large event, you're not talking directly to the candidate. Although, of course, the candidate can spend an hour smoozing after giving their little speech or whatever. But if they're giving it say some actual longer dinner, then they're not going to stick around, or talk to people in the hallway, people pull them aside or something. But if the candidate has a pleasing personality, as most of them do, or they wouldn't be candidates, each person hasn't that been turned around these days? Seems like all of our politicians have terrible personalities, but when it comes to old people, they'll still say, "Oh, I like them. They're nice." They're nice,
Yeah.
I mean, Trump. Fuck, they love Trump for that. Like, oh, he's great. He's a nice guy. He tells it like it is. He doesn't lie to me. He hates me to my face.
Straight
Operation
shooter.
Coffee Cup, sponsored by the National Federation of Republican Women in the 1958 campaign, used the same basic appeals, but had several unique features. The program was tied to the Republican National Precinct Day and social gatherings called powwows. Well, that's not appropriation. That were held throughout the nation. See, white people can't come up with their own fucking unique things. They have to.
I know,
They have to
right?
call them powwows or potlucks. Even I'm uncomfortable
There you
with calling things potlucks because I'm not Iroquois, you know, or potlatch is Northwestern.
Yeah, that's right.
The goal was to have one such gathering, which might include breakfast, you know, money for plate dinner, maybe. The recent development of the informal social hour as a campaign technique is, of course, just an extension of the practice that has long been followed by candidates of pairing briefly at all types of public functions, county fairs, picnics, funerals, even weddings. I've never, unless the candidate is a
Weddings.
friend of the family or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
right.
If
It's gonna
candidates
go
go to
start
weddings.
wedding crashing.
Yeah, wedding crashing. Jesus Christ. I guess like in the corner church or something. And then
Yeah,
you go
maybe.
there. It's like church or practical politicians have learned it is useful to have a buffer team to accompany the candidate at these small gatherings or larger ones. The buffer
The
team
buffer
sees that those in attendance have a chance to meet the candidate, prevents one or two people from monopolizing his time. You know, the candidate will say, "Got to wrap up this conversation. I want to talk to
Right.
someone else." No. You have someone
have to have
else.
someone-
Okay, you have someone else. So it's the buffer team that gets
That's
the.
right.
Oh, they snubbed me or they cut me off. Not the candidate. The candidate wanted to talk to me more, but he had to talk to someone
they just
else.
kept going, but
But you know what?
yeah.
Maybe it's the asshole in me. I don't want a fucking buffer team. I want to say, okay, nice to meet you. I want to talk to this person next, you know, or you know.
Yeah, sure. I think if you can do it tactfully, then yeah.
Yeah,
no need
or
to
just a nice little pivot of like, oh, okay, so what do you do? You know, I mean, make
there
it
you go. Yeah.
more like a more of a group where it isn't just one person at a time, where each person feels like they're my friend because they talk to me one on one, but more like let's make a big circle, and the more people want to talk to me, they come over and join the circle. But then, of course, I welcome them and say, "Oh, who are you? How are you doing?" Because that way, it's not just one on one talking. I'm like, "Oh, all the rest of you can start talking and mingling."
Yeah,
and then
that's a good idea.
Refocus or something.
I like that.
Okay, I'm sorry, jumping ahead. So, okay, that's it on the with the speakers committee. Again, that's a lot of volunteers. And I have a buffer team. They could probably be the same people. So, in an ideal campaign, a candidate would shake. So, this is now the public relations committee, which I would horizontally speak in horizontal orgs. I would consider the outreach working group, not call it public relations, because that's just, you know. An ideal campaign, a candidate would shake the hand of every potential voter. Obviously, that is impossible. And the more heavily populated the area, the more difficult it becomes. As a result, a political campaign must rely on the indirect ways of reaching the voters. So now we're actually going to talk about mass media. Campaign pamphlets, throwaways. They actually call them throwaways.
Wow.
But let's call them.
True, but
I like quarter-sized flyers. You know,
there you go.
or like, you know, here, I actually have a bunch here so I can show off from previous. I was going through my box of campaign lit. So this is one for Mark Dunley for state controller. Nice color, index card size.
Yeah.
This one is for Jill. It's a half size, so it has the platform on one side with the contact info, with a big, you know, picture, with, you know.
Okay, that's nice on the front.
And this was her standard talking point. If everyone with student debt voted for Jill Stein, we would have won.
Wow.
Because we were the only campaign.
True.
We were the only campaign in 2016 that talked about ending student debt. And people like John Oliver called us kooks for that. Now,
Did he really?
Now it's the standard progressive progressive talking point for the most part.
That's
Or at
sad.
least if you're left of
That's
center.
sad. Well, I mean, even Biden
It's when I
about
stopped
it.
watching John Oliver, by the way. YouTube keeps suggesting him for me. It's annoying as fella. I mean, his sections are good. I mean, he does good stuff. Like he just did a thing about police interrogations and forcing people to confess. But again, I mean, it'll lead you to police abolition conclusions, but never.
Right.
But when it comes to topics relating to what do we do about it, how do we organize to change things, that's when no help whatsoever. The opposite, even. So here's another Jill one, which is a fold out. I actually thought this was kind of a waste. It should just keep being half size, but this one is it is a half size, but it folds out. So it's like a book.
Yeah.
It's in our hands was our tagline in 2016. So it has the full platform inside, thing on the back. Anyway, here's some shorter ones like the palm card. We call them palm cards. So these are the standard size for a palm card. Roughly like 3 letter size sheet makes 3 of them.
Right.
And so you can really fit everything you need to fit on it. So like the full platform's on the back. Nice. The skewed name thing, which AOC's PR team kind of came up with, which are anti-capitalist people, by the way. And just on the front is just Howie Hawkins, who is Howie Hawkins, and Jaya Lee, who is a teachers union person down in New York City.
Oh.
So that's the kind of thing the Green Party, at least in New York, started, and then we moved up to the national level there to say, no, we're going to run. They're not going to be hippie activists. They're going to be union people, and make that kind of the thing we do for our major candidates. Once upon a time, the first time Green Party got the ballot line in New York, we won with the. Oh, I should know his name. It starts with Lewis. The guy who played Grandpa Munster, and he was a anti-war, really serious socialistic anti-war activist. He was our gubernatorial candidate, so he had a little bit of celebrity status, but it's just. And that's kind of that was the mindset into we shouldn't have Jill run in 2016. We should have can you and
I'm glad that never came to fruition.
The argument is made that she made her reactionary turn because she didn't get the Green Party nomination.
I mean, is that much better, though, if that's all it takes?
But the point, there's that. But also, counter, on the other hand, she did not get the nomination because it was very clear to a majority of our delegates that she had reactionary undercurrents, that she could make a nice populist stump speech that included progressive politics, anti-war rhetoric, and left of center economics. But she was not anti-imperialist at all. She was Zionist, and which was a clincher for most. Actually, it's weird that was kind of the make or break issue for a lot of is being pro-Israel, and that's kind of where
I can see that.
And that's where her reaction was like, the left are crazy, they're crazy, and they canceled me, or they didn't want me as their candidate, so they're crazy, and I'm for Trump now because it's just I'm more about just being anti-establishment, and the left are crazy because they split hairs about Israel, and the argument is that like it says a lot if you are going to defend Israel and not Palestinians,
right?
If you're for a genocidal state like that, then it's just like we really don't have the same politics. Even if you're have an almond farm and whatever.
Right. So I've heard that too. Amazing Wolf skeptic that Bookchin was a Zionist, but I've heard that there's some disputes about how true that actually ended up being, but I don't know for sure.
I'm sure we could talk to his kids about that. They're obviously
Yeah,
not.
that's right. His daughter's still pretty active.
They're not. She's not a Zionist. I don't.
Oh yeah,
I
don't
didn't
think
get that
so.
impression at all. Though, of course, she might have been hiding it or something. I don't know. But it's not like Roseanne Barr kind of hid Zionism. I mean, she had to be asked. What's your position on Palestinian rights? And she's like, "Oh, I'm for Palestinian rights. I just believe in Israel's right to defend itself against terrorists." So, and it went downhill from there. But the main argument for it is that we need a celebrity, and that's just not good enough for activists. That like we want to win because we organized, or we want to organize a party, and having a celebrity candidate doesn't do that. People join for the candidate, not the party, and that's what happened with Nader. And a lot of our core didn't want to repeat that. Did not want to repeat that, and so we've kind of been nominating organizers ever since. Whether or not that's been a boon or not, time will tell. But I think the numbers it was sort of positive, but it's just that we just been so much. So now it's like it's not really about doing; it's what the two-party system does to us, puts in our way, and puts in the way of all campaigning. So. I think 3 years ago it would seem impossible to organize Amazon warehouses, and the brigade there have shown that it just takes a 2-year campaign of just doing that, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to is his daughter an anarchist? I mean, you say Bookchin is a type of anarchist, but they wouldn't say that like they're a straight anarchist. They're municipalists. They're libertarian municipalists is the tendency that they've given the name to the ideology. And you could say it's a type of anarchism, but it kind of isn't government. It's that it's putting primacy on local government.
It seems like communism from the other direction.
Yeah.
Like
it's
making from the bottom up.
Making your local government the vanguard state, so to like, and starting there and not from the national level down. So it's sort of the same as forming a Soviet, though it's not. It actually isn't, because a Soviet is
it's similar.
A Soviet is a workers' union, a tenants' union. Those are Soviets. So, but if you regard it as local government state kind of thing, where you nationalize, you make housing majority public housing, you didn't have to organize Soviets or unions to do that. So it's kind of like coming at things from a state-centered point of view, actually, of taking state power, but on the local level where you can actually do it with 100 people. You just need 100 strong people to do that.
Yeah.
To take city government or half of city government and put up a fight. Your main obstacle will be like real estate wherever you are. It's good because when it comes to people or building wealth now, it's all like you can see the trends and the jokes about it. That's like, oh, I put money into real estate. Buy houses, buy multifamily units, that kind of stuff.
I would say that democratic municipalism is not necessarily top down if everyone gets a vote at the local level. Like if you're doing more direct democracy at whatever that smallest unit is. So
it's top down in the way that if bottom up is only defined as a bunch of anarchist collectives, governance operations, then if that's the only way you do, something can be defined as bottom up, because that's a conversation for another day when it comes to like that. I mean, we can have that on the President Sunday's channel, because he's having those discussions about what is the state, can we overcome thought bat versus others, or thought bat goes into this as a channel. He was a libertarian socialist. What counts as bottom up? What counts as top down? I mean, these questions seem to be way more unresolved than we ever thought they were. But yeah, because once you start interrogating it, it just adds some. So it goes in the mass media. Talking about advertising, the short of it is, it's not really important to advertise, but for public relations, direct communications media has two uses: to carry free publicity and to carry paid advertising. By carry, I guess, do it, coordinate it. A newspaper, for example, may in its news columns pictures of its stories about meetings and other items. I skip all of this because most people are not actually using to learn anything. It's all quote unquote fake news.
Mm-hmm.
So, and something I learned was that, like, you need community media people trust, or us media collectives that build audiences to inform people, because otherwise people are not going to be informed any other way. How so? Because when I was running for mayor, I got pretty good coverage in the newspaper. Better cover, I couldn't really ask for more than what they did. They actually they covered my announcement as a standalone news item, with a picture of me and so on. And they would ask me for my view on a few stories during the Democratic primary. Green Party primary too, but the summer. They asked for my position a few times. So I actually it actually felt like I was legitimate. They were treating me like a legitimate candidate. And I also participated in a few forums, which were more Democratic primary forums, but some orgs, in two at least, included us, party candidates. There was two of us. I covered that before. What am I getting at? Pretty good coverage in the standard local media, and got to the hands of 1 in 30 people. As I canvassed, one heard of me before or learned of my campaign through the paper. That's what it felt like, numbers. I think I was literally counting. And it's out of the 50 people I canvassed today, 2 had read the article of me in the paper. So it's that's not great reach.
Yeah.
That's not it wasn't worth having a campaign announcement, public, have a press conference. You do that stuff, but it's not it's sort of is it the best use?
Yeah. Some opportunity cost issues.
Yeah, you have your own organization media, which is kind of how, in a way, Fox News and the big conglomerates are the major party media. They do their media for them. They are integrated. It was shown in the various past few cycles, if you were paying attention. We need our own. And by that I mean all these independent leftists, which are so high, it seems like a fault, like an idealistic highbrowness, smarriness. That's I'm so above it, I don't take sides. No, you need to be party media, but for the left. But since the left, they say the left doesn't have a party, so there's no party for me to boost all the time. But that's wrong. You could be covering the Greens and the socialists and talking them up. We need that morale boost. But it's no, my integrity is that I'm objective, and the objective truth is that left parties are too weak to do anything. It's well, not with that attitude. You have mass media saying the Democrats are the best or the Republicans are the best, and they'll save you. Are they lying? I guess, but I'm not saying lie. But they would consider.
I know what you're getting at.
Party should. I think it's not a lie to say that things or organization should matter in the same way that they easily say that labor unions matter.
Yeah, there you go.
That's true. And they should also say the Green Party matters or could matter. They don't matter yet. So maybe we put some towards. We take 10 million, we put in the Green and socialist parties. So party. And then we take the other half and put in labor unions, and we organize, we expand the organization that's happening.
Absolutely. And I see a lot of parallels between advocating for the Green Party and advocating for labor unions, because both are operating on capitalism's terms. Both are trying to fight for a better world, living in the bourgeois world that we have now.
Yeah, that's sort of why I also party work, because any argument against doing electoral work is also an argument for any kind of system denial,
Right.
or a game denial, which is to just check out of everything. But
Right.
that's just doomerism. You look at what the people
Black belt, yeah.
they're able to do. Well, I'm talking about the black, like, people who aren't like completely depressed, but like they just do mutual aid, and that's all they can do, because the thing you can do that isn't that in the sense of game, deny the game. You're not looking to change the game, play the game, and that the game is there, or that you're not going to participate.
Yeah.
But there's two ways of looking at it. That you have like this one podcaster called like Cool Hype Media or something. They had a generic name, but they're like, we're actually left wingers, but we're like, we picked a name and we're taking corporate money because they're going to give it to somebody. And if we can fund anti-capitalist stuff, even though their shows aren't explicitly political, but they're more about kind of basic education on issues that get people towards thinking about it, or questioning capitalism. But it still grossed me out listening to them about like that also defeatist energy of the capitalists are going to give, Time Warner is going to give the money to somebody, it might as well go to us. But it's like, that's complete game acceptance. Oh yeah, because they also said like, we don't believe capitalism could end in our lifetime, so there's no point in working towards that.
Right.
Which is also like, it's just totally defeatist. How is it going to end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether if it's going to end in the next lifetime, not ours, it will only happen if we're building dual power.
Right.
And you're not doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah. How much more do you
egoist, individualist. Let's see.
I want to make sure we get through it before.
Yeah. So let's move ahead. Situations, literature. I just show some lit, so I don't think I need to go through that much. Notes on use of mass media. Frequently, those prepared aim entirely at the hostile cited. Some authorities believe that material in mass media has little direct effect on the undecided voter. This is bared out by all research in the intervening decades. He is not very interested. He is bombarded with opposing claims, and he may be faced with inner conflict. The Democrats say this and Republicans say that. I just don't know.
Just don't know who to believe. Yeah.
Or can be really well educated, and talking about a guy in my office, very smart guy, has solar panels on his house, and he was like doing a one hand to the other hand between Biden and Trump. He basically doesn't, he hates both of them. Like, oh, Biden's terrible. He's old. He's not gonna, like, you should just, he's gonna die, and all these bad things have happened since he became president. But Trump is just such an asshole. He's terrible, and it's just like, he's an undecided voter, really, because between Democrat and Trump, he's gonna like do all these pro and con ways, but it's all a wash,
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter to him. His life will continue regardless,
right,
based on his material circumstances. He doesn't care. He doesn't actually have to vote, and maybe he's the type that just won't, because he also has to throw in that line about like, oh, there's nobody else. Like, wrong. There is always someone. Because there's a bunch of us that put in a lot of make sure there's someone else on the ballot. So it really hurts. It really hurts to hear there's no one else. I really hate hearing that, because a lot of people put in a lot of man hours. This shit is a lot of fucking time. It's a lot of fucking work. So that's true. Kind of why, if I get this guys and don't want to do this to the fullest, it's because it's like I could put in 30 hours in the next month to get 1,000 signatures. And in October, I will hear half of the people I know say Hochul versus Flynn, Republican front runner, I guess. I see the most ads for him. It's one of the two. There's no one else to vote for.
Right.
How he could be right on the ballot, it won't fucking matter. And
Right.
it just burns me in my core, or demoralizes me. And it was the same demoralization that has hit me since before the 2020 election. Like it was the year before that, basically. That it was just I had this dread that has not left me. That until the Green Party kind of goes bottom up and doesn't worry about balance until later, and build small parties instead, doing community projects, which is kind of what some of our members ask for when new people join. They're like, "Oh, I want to do community projects. Why does the Green Party do this?" And like labor unions can do, and because that's the thing, we can do things, we can pay for things that nonprofits can't, and whatever. But it's just we're fighting with the purpose of the party, which is to do electoral politics. So if we don't do that, it just our leaders are just like, no, we have to do this. We have to try to get our ballot line back. And Howie has to run for governor a fourth time. And I'm not sure I agree with that anymore. So, but at the same time, well, fuck, I might be convincing myself not to do any more petitioning. Because it's not like you convince people to join the party or something when you're petitioning. You're just asking.
Yeah. You're just trying to get the bare minimum.
And it's also just
going.
getting the canvassing muscle back, so I feel less anxious, going out there and talking with strangers.
Sure.
Asking strangers for something, that isn't change. That isn't change. Busking.
Right.
Fuck. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let's pull out of that spiral.
But again, all my energy is kind of going toward. Well, my intention is going towards the radio station and getting that to be an actual cultural force in Albany,
which is awesome.
It isn't yet. It's so far from where it should be, because most people don't know it exists. Just like the Green Party.
Right.
So it's less like I need to pick which one I actually want to make big, and because it already has volunteers and a building, but that the radio station is farther along than the Albany County Green Party, which is sad because I don't want to keep putting it off, because guess what? We only got less than 10 years. We got 8 years before it's game over. But I think we could have come to the conclusion back in 2012 that it was, it's too late. Even if there was full revolution, right? You could say 2020 was the big chance, but the big revolt was just for the police to stop shooting black people. And guess what? They haven't stopped at all. Nothing was changed, because just mobilizing in the street isn't organizing, and it wasn't power. It wasn't political power at all. It was just a threat that you better do something or else. And man, did the liberals in power just not want to deal with that. They were just ready to go full fascist. I mean, it's just the easiest thing to do, to just like, no. I'd rather not bend to these simple, sensible demands, because if I did, it'd be basically the same as negotiating with terrorists. It's the same logic, because the riot is basically a mass version of a terrorist act against property, of course. But whether you're blowing up a building or torching it, as what's happened, or breaking windows, which happened in Albany, which is all that happened in Albany. But it still got all the liberals up in a dizzy, and not wanting to basically. Well, we did get a reform passed by referendum. Actually, we did, but just the committee that investigates cops can actually charge them, and they have teeth, which they didn't before.
That's something.
Okay, so just covering the last. There's a legal committee just have a lawyer or a volunteer who
Yeah.
contact your local chapter of the what is it, the damn it there's an organization of like lawyer activists,
Legal aid.
the Lawyers Guild, the National
Lawyers Guild. Okay.
Lawyers Guild. Yeah, Lawyers Guild. Now, of course, they don't usually. Their services are for pro catchers.
Yeah.
And they record any on the scene and stuff. And they're the people you call if you get arrested. Have any do the canvassing? We kind of talked about that last time with that. So just going over and canvassing. Having their database. And here's a special services committee. During a political campaign, a candidate and his party may receive requests for special services, as well as much free advice on how to run the campaign, tips on what the opposition is doing, and so on. So to have a tip line. So someone who is manning the email. So when you have a public email and having somebody check the email, basically. So I guess I would think that would be like the outreach team. I think some of these committees would be folded in, but obviously the more campaign or the more people you have streaming in, you need individual people handling it. Political organizations are built to some extent by special favors they are able to perform for voters. This is something I've discussed a few times. Bronx leader Ed Flynn says, the election districts bring to the leader all sorts of entreaties. A boy may be in trouble. Someone may be out of work. Someone may run afoul of the law in a minor way. Someone may want a civil service promotion. And remember that to 99 out of 100 voters, these personal matters are more important than what is happening in Paris or the tariff or even new sewers. Whether they should or shouldn't be the point, they just are. I feel like I was covering this with something related to the precinct leader, of course, will handle most of these cases. That's why you have precincts, precinct organizations. The special services unit can also perform a useful service, meaning all the advice it pours into headquarters. Obvious crackpots can be tactfully thanked and gotten rid of without burdening the leaders with the job. Worthwhile suggestions can be passed on. So they're just screeners, screen out the trolls.
Right.
Which is kind of odd, but I guess you have social media people, for the online side of that, which is where they probably all be coming in.
Yeah.
But they come in the form of comments, which are easily ignored. But you to actually have go through all the comments on whatever posts related to the campaign and actually kind of catalog them, man, can you?
Yeah.
But that's never mentioned when people talk about campaigning. Just how much engagement are you getting or not? If people are commenting, whether or not it's positive or not or whatever, like no one's counting that. It seems
right. Yeah.
Is Zuckerberg counting this stuff? Probably.
Probably if you can sell it.
So the final, it's not the final section, but the next section is about financing. So have a fundraising working group. This is where having a strong party organization kind of comes first, because if people are paying dues for the party and the party does the fundraising, the candidate doesn't really have to do it, or they can do a minimum amount based on like their friends and people who would only donate because it's them, it's personal, not ideological. But ideally, we want people to act ideologically, which of course is the nightmare of the independent voter and any red-blooded American who is basically non-ideological. They pride themselves on not being ideological, and anyone who is a threat. And we're extremists, and we're always the bad guys in movies. Right. Bad guy in a movie is always someone with an ideology.
That's true. That's true.
Such is pure ideology. That is to say. So then election day, get out the vote. I'm not sure. Do I need to cover that? Checking for fraud. Timing issues. Okay, so last page. The goal of every campaign, timing issues. The goal of every campaign is to bring the enthusiasm of the workers and of the campaign workers, not actual workers, working class,
Right.
but of the voters to its highest peak on election day. Almost everyone can remember campaigns in which the candidate seemed to be more popular at the beginning of the campaign than at the end. This may have been due to some unfortunate occurrence, such as an ill-advised remark of the candidate that received wide publicity. But more likely, it was due to the fact that the campaign hit its peak before Election Day. Politicians say this was what happened to Wilkie's campaign in 1940. In other campaigns, it is obvious that there's a name you don't know. The guy who lost to Roosevelt, right? Who cares who lost to Roosevelt?
Exactly. Yeah. Remember those
In other campaigns, it is obvious that the real drive was organized too late to achieve its maximum effectiveness on Election Day. Now, this is what it felt like in New York with the Bernie campaign. That after Super Tuesday, New York is after it, I think, that all the air was out.
Yeah, he totally lost his momentum.
It was all complete. It was already lost, and I saw very little activity on the part of, apparently I thought our county was inundated with Bernie crats. So many showed up to see Bernie. Nobody showed up to see, any other Democrat. But were they really organized? Were they really out getting out the vote and stuff? Because when it came to the New York primary, it seemed like every Bernie crat stayed home. Like that there was voter suppression too, but it just seemed like they didn't come out. They just didn't come out. Yeah. It was sort of resounding defeat. He got like 35% for it. He didn't even break 40. It was bad. Which goes to show either how conservative New York Democrats are, in that, like, as strong as our progressives can be sometimes, like, we do have a lot of Democratic socialists or Dem-soaks in state legislature now. But, and this is between 2016 2020 as well. But it didn't seem to matter. It was maybe if things went differently, which of course they wouldn't have, but okay, I won't dwell on that. The start campaigning long before, probably as much as a year, possibly, the formal announcement of the candidacy. This has many advantages. It can be made to candidate is responding to popular demand that he run. So it's like you create your own reason to run. Oh, people are talking about me because I'm out in public. And thus people are like, oh, you should run. It's like they think it was their idea that he run for office. I want to point out that Jill Stein, between 2012 and 2016, basically never stopped running for president. She was always out doing stuff. Like she was the only candidate or any national figure who went.
I was just going to say that.
She spray painted a bulldozer and a lot of like that. She face property.
God.
But we actually had to spin it. Like, no, the activist asked her to do it, and the local
so ridiculous.
It was, but that was like when progressives are just fine. They just want to find an excuse not to like.
Yeah.
But she was doing that. What year was Dapple? It was 2014. Like, it was in the last year of Obama's presidency.
Yeah, it was through 2016.
It was leading up to 2016 at the very least. But but I know she was out doing stuff and campaigning for the most part, a whole 2 years at least. Like she didn't really stop. Maybe she took a year off or something. But she's a full-time activist, so it just looks like I was just watching what she was doing. Which is why it was so clear, like she's going to be our candidate again. But so Sartor, an influential man who is not a candidate may be asked to speak at more meetings and receive more favorable publicity than after he became a candidate. After his candidacy announced, both the press and the public may be inclined to discount his remarks. Now, this is something I actually have like anxieties about. That once you're running for office, it's like you're partisan now. So anyone who even listens to you, it's like it's a partisan position to now listen to you or not.
Ugh.
It's like who, because like Chapo Trap House talks about this all the time, that like your virtue, you can't change policy or the state of the country, so you can only reflect your values based on what media you consume or
Mhm.
like who you interact with. And so you'll have like, it's like people need to agree with you before they're listen to you. People need to be to vote for Bernie Sanders to even come out and listen to him to learn more about him. And that's what I feel like with Green Party stuff, that people need to um, at least be inclined towards third party politics, hate the two party system before they will even give us the time of day. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, there's all of this baggage of still being a pro two party system or nihilistic or cynical about it. That we have the two party system and you can't work outside of it,
Can't change it. Yeah.
or can't change it, which of course is just like, and these are people who do other activism too. So it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
why do you think anything can change? Brownie.
Yeah. Right.
A vivid example of how politicians of both parties talk, think, and plan long before the candidates are even selected was described by Jack Redding in his book Inside the Democratic Party. The story of the events leading up to the presidential election of 1948. It'll be Dewey again, says Hannigan, but Dewey will have to run on that what Taft does in Congress. Actually, if the Republicans were smart, they'd run Taft. He'd make a better candidate and would probably be harder for us to beat simply because he would fight harder. Don't make the mistake of undermining Taft. Many people think he'll be easy to beat, but that's because they see in his nomination the simple matter of a clear division between the parties. The fact is that Taft is a fighter and will make a terrific fight for what he represents. Dewey will be me too all over again. He'll tend to beat himself. Just remember, if Dewey is the candidate, as I think he will be, he'll have to run on Taft's program. Hit Taft hard and often. Maybe we can stop him from getting the nomination and at the same time embarrass Dewey. So something to remember: Taft is one of those figures, and this isn't President Taft. I think this is his son or something, a Republican
Yeah.
senator, along with Hartley. There's the Taft-Hartley Act
Oh
in
yes.
1948, and it's a villainous piece of legislation, a law that most are not aware of because they don't interact. If you're not an organizer, then it doesn't seem to affect you. But if once you are an organizer, you'll notice that there are laws that keep you from succeeding, and the Taft-Hartley Act is one of those things. It's also one of those things that didn't seem to be at the time, but in the next 15 years was one of the laws that slowly eroded the power of labor. The
Mm-hmm.
Taft-Hartley Act is is a law that kind of stops. Um, it keeps public employees from being political, basically. They can't be overtly political. They can't run for office and hold public office at the same time. That's really the case, but um, it basically makes it illegal to be political while in office, while you're working, basically, and it risks organizing. So you had all this labor organizing that was done in the 40s and 30s, and then big labor was that, and it could only decrease from there because of laws like Taft-Hartley. And you notice they were passed right after World War II ended, because we're a hegemon now, and we can concentrate on fighting um, radicals slash socialists at home. In the beginning of the Cold War and stuff. Political skill, said Lynn, is mostly built on proper timing. By and large, this sense of timing must be developed through trial and error campaigns. At the same time, there are some useful guideposts. Most important election calendar. This is based on the legal requirements for such things as the last day of absentee voter applications, the last day for submitting petitions, and so on. The following possible timetable for a campaign will serve not only as a useful guide in planning a campaign, but also as a review of the entire campaign procedure. In most states, for the general election is preceded by a primary election in which the parties nominate candidates. Primaries may be held any time from January on, as specified by state law. Primary campaigns may be just as thoroughly planned and organized. Okay. This is basic stuff. General election, and it just lays out an actual like checklist of what you should be doing for each month. So this is working off of a general election timetable where you have a primary at the beginning of the summer and September 1st. So it lists a number of things you do. Then there's just the month of September, get your operations underway, print your lit, start the campaign's personal program, which is like their calendar. It's strange, their program is their calendar, their schedule. Assign projects to various clubs that are involved. Start arrangements. That's the thing, you assign projects. Usually the groups come to you with projects. Hey, can we do this for you? Or we're interested in doing this. I mean that it's a bit more democratic now. I think back when it was a machine, groups would actually ask, "What do you want us to do?" Pretty interesting change over time. October 1st, the excitement increases. Get the speakers, get out speaking, canvassing, so on. 2 weeks before off, plan for central telephone canvassing, plan for sound truck operation during the last 4 days of campaign. I've always wanted to do this, but nobody flies for it.
It sounds so fun.
We've settled for doing caravans, like driving around town doing a caravan. But caravans don't have sound unless someone's blasting music. But that's not they can blast the Internationale or labor songs or Pete Seeger. Just doing that could be just what you do, but yeah, but like Japan still has like the trope of having like a trailer and having the candidate on it basically drive around and make speeches on corners from it.
There you go.
I'm above you. That's the thing. It's so un-American to do that, right? But I just saw. It's probably practically a joke by now, but I caught up on My Hero Academia, and there's not a villain, but like basically besides the villain organization, there is a mass movement for it's a political movement, and they have their own party, and called the Hearts and Minds Party. And so they have a politician who's like one of their leaders. So he was on a trailer, and his quirk, his superpower is inspiring people, where they get stronger when he speaks to them, when he speaks. It's funny.
It's funny.
What's interesting, it's an interesting world where most people have superpowers. But the way the government has dealt with it is to actually make it illegal to use your powers publicly unless you're a licensed hero. So unless you're serving the state in a crime, search and rescue, help people, capacity, you're not allowed to use your powers publicly. And which means that heroes have celebrity, they can make a lot of money, and creates this corrupt culture, which is at odds, and it's kind of the main conflict of the show, really. That
sounds very interesting.
So you have this political revolutionary organization. They are revolutionaries, and they want to overthrow the government and liberate. They're liberatory. They're a liberation organization, and want to liberate people with with powers. Basically, we want to be able to use our powers all the time, and because we're responsible adults or something like that. And also part of it is training yourself, be able to use your power, because everyone has a power, but unless you train your body and practice it, it doesn't do a lot. It's really simple. But sort of the meritocracy of it is that the people who become heroes, they go to special schools, they train hard, and even when they have at the beginning of the show a really kind of this is a dinky kind of quirk, but the progression, the DBZ quality of it is that after a few seasons, Like they're doing amazing shit, and
Hmm.
you know.
Interesting. That's
Um,
cool.
so I've reached the end, by the way. But oh no, sorry, there's more issues. No pamphlet such as this can outline effective campaign strategy. That strategy must be fashioned from all the facts that can be collected and the opinions and behaviors of the voters as interpreted by the campaign leaders. The Survey Research Center, University of Michigan, following an exhaustive analysis of the 1952 elections, reached this conclusion. It is clear that both candidates in 1952 received the largest portion of their support from their loyal partisans who had followed the party banner in 48. This is the solid core which both parties depend on when they go into election. In 1952, this core was a much larger proportion of the Democratic total vote was of the Republican. Although in actual numbers of voters, the two party followings did not differ greatly in this respect. Each party added to its core vote a sizable number of newly activated voters and a somewhat smaller number of young voters. Each drew a small number of young people who had voted for minor parties in 48, like Debs. I don't know if Debs was in 48, but there was likely a
Mm,
socialist candidate then.
yeah.
The coup de grace was administered to the hopes of the Democratic Party, however, by the addition to the Republican total of a substantial number of erstwhile Democrats. Had these 1948 Democrats stayed with Stevenson in 1952, General Eisenhower would not have gone to the White House. The lessons of a national campaign, in which voters are more likely to shift allegiances than in a local campaign, emphasizes two important interrelated parts of any successful campaign. The first is the use of an effective precinct organization to get out the loyal partisan vote. The second part is to use good candidates and effective propaganda to prevent defections of those who have less strong party ties and to win over those who might lean the other way. Because by this time, it wasn't so important to, vote for Labor or something like that because Labor
Right.
was winning. So there was a bit of complacency, but also because Eisenhower's policies, as has been pointed out, are like Bernie Sanders' platform today. But there was just no intention of doing much of it because in reality it was building a war machine, fighting communism, and actually slowly but silently almost breaking labor. They must appeal to the people. So what about candidates? They must appeal to the people. Most politicians would agree that when Eisenhower said he would go to Korea to end the war in his 1952 campaign, it had great emotional appeal. Conversely, they would agree that Stevenson's discussions of the hydrogen bomb tests in 1956 never captured the popular imagination. They must be suitable to the area. Issues in a large city will be different than those in a rural area. A candidate in the Pacific Northwest may talk about public power more than a candidate in Massachusetts. And they must be related to the office. So, in general, campaigns revolve around one or two issues, going back to Raymond Morley. Don't confuse voters with many issues, some of which are small and others large. A selection should be made by a committee composed of the wisest and most experienced of the organizing group, together with the candidate or candidates and top regular party people. Stick to those issues. Don't be diverted into adding new ones brought up by the opposition. Those wise in the ways of politics can usually determine the issues before the opposition has opened fire. When presented often, these put the opposition in a position of answering and denying, which is often fatal. Seize the initiative and keep it. Some practical politicians have advanced the belief that every campaign should have a theme, not necessarily a slogan, but a general theme around which the campaigning can be built. On the national level, the selection of such a theme, like Build Back Better,
Yeah.
and such a theme and the issue is illustrated once again by Mr. Redding, the publicity director for President Truman's 1948 campaign. I think we can get the jump on our Republican friends by radio. We can hit anything that moves if we get the offensive. The trick will be to have them explaining and answering what we have to say. We should never answer them. Let them do the explaining. How will you get the jump on radio? Asked Hannigan. How can you get the jump on them anywhere? The issue is big business and the high cost of living. or accuse them on this issue, indict them, and find them guilty. But Truman was very much for big business. Lying Democrats, I guess.
Yeah.
Only Roosevelt could, be anti-big business and welcome their hatred. So and then it covers the follow-through. That's the last page. Follow-through is going through election night and thanking everybody who helps. Thanks. The first thing that experienced politicians do the day after the election is to make sure that all that worked on behalf are thanked. Send out cards.
Yeah.
And then do an analysis. Do a debrief. Always do a debrief, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
postmortem. Yeah.
That's it.
Very cool.
We're over 10 o'clock. Well, 10 o'clock for me.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to hit?
No.
Yeah.
I think that covers it pretty well.
We went over. So, but there, I actually covered. This was the thickest one, so it's all downhill from here. It's a lot to ingest. Now, of course, there are tons of videos on how to campaign or panels on campaigning from various experienced people, like radicals and revolutionaries. Hell, you can, but it's not enough to just listen to some. I keep forgetting his first name, Mr. Smalls. Some of his interviews. It's not enough to just watch some clips of a successful organizer that tells you nothing about how they succeeded.
Yeah, you need the nuts and bolts of it too.
But this is where Jacobin articles come in. This is where the Real News Network comes in. They do in-depth reporting. Jordan Chariton of Status Coup kind of does this to an extent, but he's not very good, actually.
Okay.
He is not concise, especially with his streams. I listen to them, and it's just it seems like whatever the topic is, he takes longer to explain things each time he does it. You should be getting more concise the more you explain something, but he actually ends up talking longer each time he explains something. Maybe because he keeps adding new information and whatever, but he ends up re-explaining things over and over. It's like he has an audience. It's over a new audience, is it?
Right.
It's weird. He's a weird guy. He needs an editor, I think, and he doesn't have one. So it just comes down to that the general thesis of this so far is that it's really more about building up our partisan side and not having to reach out and try to grow more. We can do that, of course, but like if we're going to do anything, we have to build up our side. And that means being proud partisans, not too many progressives want to both sides it with like their well, I mean, actually it's not just progressives in the Green Party that are like in Canada, their Green Party has been they have a more parliamentary system. They should be doing better, but for the longest time they've just been social democrats that are just barely left of because they have the NDP, right? So they have their Social Democratic Party. So they're just the environmentalist version of that, which doesn't differentiate them enough. They need to be more left of the NDP, which is, they've split in half over this, but they haven't literally split. But I mean, they did last year because they have two factions now. They're not united. But there's the faction that has been running the Green Party in Canada. Their slogan is, "We're not left or right. We're forward." Most Green parties in the world, and Greens in America, older ones, of course, that have this. They're older boomers, and they have this attitude of like, we appeal to the independent-minded non-voter of both parties, and for this, we can't be partisan and be left-wing. Because that means we'll only be able to garner the motion of Democrats who just don't want to vote for the moderate Dem, or progressives or something like that, like working families party. But that's been a losing strategy as far as I'm concerned. And Yeah, so it's just like you actually get more when you actually stand for something that's different from what the two parties offer.
I agree.
Because if you're
I
just
agree.
Democrats light, that's not enough.
Democrats plus environment. Yeah.
Democrats plus environment, which is the worst way the Greens are portrayed, because that's sort of what you get. I mean, Ralph Nader is not just a Democrat with environmentalism, but
No. Yeah.
he's not a socialist either,
Right.
and or left. He doesn't actually have left. Well, pro labor, of course, but not true lefty politics, But
True.
it's strange that way. But like, because he wouldn't be partisan about it. He wouldn't be partisan about being a Green, and thus he couldn't organize people as Greens, as leftists, or whatever. Just only anti-establishment types, what have you. And that's kind of been a lot of our local candidates, and why the Greens haven't really built a stronger brand. But because here's the contradiction though. When Greens do win local office, it is usually because they ran in a nonpartisan way. They ran just because they were the best candidate. They ran a good campaign. They didn't run as a partisan or a socialist or whatever, just a competent environmentalist. But with pro-labor, messaging, of course, too, which is how we've won some mayorships. But you can also talk to recent success stories in the Green Party, and what messaging they use. That you don't turn people off by using the S word, I guess. Yeah. But neither do people in the DSA who are Maoists.
Yeah.
We keep hiding our power level, I guess, unless you're the actual. Unless you're the patriotic, the national, the socialist, national socialists. They're the ones that are truly
the Pat Sox. Oh
yeah, the Pat
God.
Sox. Yeah, the Pat Sox.
Oh jeez.
And they don't have a party though. They talk about, or at least Peter Coffin talks about, their tendency or whatever community joining the Communist Party and taking that over, because that's been a Democratic Party organ since the 70s. So it would be nice if they actually did have left-wingers, even if they were patriotic socialists. But it's strange that, with them, they make good points when fighting woke and liberal tendencies and leftist spaces, and but they do they definitely take it too far, and thus go into nutty directions by saying you and me are just acting out our bourgeois values. But it is a fair point to point out that, say, someone like Hassan, unless he's joining an organization, he's still just a LARPer. Even though the argument is that streamers and us, we can inspire, and like Hassan points out, there are people that have emailed him saying, "You inspired me, and I'm an organizer now."
Yeah.
And
that's something.
And that's cool. But why isn't Hassan a due-paying member of some organization? And by the way, it doesn't have to be just one, because he's rich enough.
Is he not?
To pay dues to all of them. Okay. That's the thing. And I have a salary now, so I'm not just going to pay dues to the Green Party. I'm going to pay dues to the IWW. I'm going to get my red card. And even though I'm as a member, I'm going to be on their email list now. But I'm going to pay dues, just as Howie does. And I'm going to pay Socialist Party dues, just as Howie does. And that's the thing, that we win by showing solidarity with all these other lefties, so that we are, in fact, on one side.
Right.
And I really liked our ticket last time, because we had Howie Green Party, but also his vice presidential candidate was an SP person, a Socialist Party person, who organized. It was in a bus drivers union, Walker, and so it was like we had a joint ticket between two parties. Last time Socialist Party had Mimi Schulchek, may he rest in peace. Now it was a joint ticket, and I hope we could keep doing that. But it was kind of strange that we did so much worse despite having two leftist organizations. But again, there is the hazard of not being united and having party discipline, We had a lot of Greens not helping because they did not like this socialist direction and being outward in. Because Howie wasn't using socialists as I'm sorry, no, he was. Eco-socialism was in the
Yeah, yeah.
campaign. So, yeah. So, and most, I don't know how many Greens are doing that in their campaigning, but on the local level, you're not winning because you're being ideological. People don't really like dealing with that. So, but it's how you invigorate your base. So you have your partisans that do the volunteer work. Otherwise, you're left with a cadre of flakes.
Sure.
And the kind of people who are really interested, and then they ghost, which is kind of what happened when I ran for mayor. I did not. We didn't have the ideologically motivated people helping me. I had people who, I don't know. People that I asked. Okay, I hear your wife. Frank.
Yeah. She's wanting to get to bed because we do have to get up pretty early. So I think we'll have to leave it there tonight. Thank you again for joining the podcast or the stream once again. It's always really interesting stuff that you cover with
We're halfway
done.
We're halfway done.
All right. Hey. Well, I'm looking forward to next time, which will be in a couple weeks.
Sure will.
All
okay.
Right.
Have a good one. Oh yeah, and so I'll just leave out. I have 2 more 2-hour episodes of the 3 Left show coming down the pipeline, and then I will be switching to local news and analysis and whatever from my area. But I will be up to, so it'll be at basically 146. I'll have 146 full episodes, and then I'm going to change the numbering. I'm going to change it to just like 1A. To distinguish for myself and myself and listeners, so there's no confusion. So if there's full number, no A, it's general leftist strategy and thinking. So the next 2 episodes I'm going to title The End, and then the last one will be the beginning.
Very cool.
Be poetic.
Well, because, that's exciting. A new era for you.
Yeah, the next episode will be me covering, not me play acting a doomer, but just reading other doomers. And
all right. And
then kind of ending with a, if things are going to be bad, just be prepared. And that revolution costs money. So maybe, put some money aside or pay dues, because hippies thought that they could change the world without spending money. And then they could follow, but then they ended up just following bourgeois values and
getting stuck into the corporate culture.
Lanes of action, and revolution isn't free. It does, in fact, you actually have to put in your $1.25.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining, and I look forward to hearing more from this series of pamphlets. So, see you next time, Dan. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. So that was Dan from the 3 Left Show. Always a fun time. And we will be continuing more with that series in a couple weeks. So tomorrow night, we're getting back to A People's History of the United States of America by Howard Zinn. We're going to try again to get the second half of Chapter 1 out of the way, and Trish will be joining me for that. So look forward to that, and I will see you guys then. Have a good one.